partnership. What does this word mean to you? Partnership is powerful. It can leverage different perspectives, create endless possibilities. Result in positive solutions for the world's toughest challenges. We live in an era where data meets science and technology meets healthcare. An ecosystem of interconnectivity. Together, we are united in our vision to improve healthcare. Together, we make the impossible possible.
Welcome to Innovation Spotlight Part 1, a conversation on global solutions for global challenges with special guest Jenny Yip, Managing Partner at Adjuvant Capital. The host for Jenny's discussion is Richard Saul, Head of Boston Office and Senior Advisor of Strategic Initiatives, WuXi Biotech. On behalf of the WuXi Healthcare Forum Organizing Committee, we welcome you to the Innovation Spotlight focusing on global solutions for global challenges. I'm Rich Saul, Head of the Boston Office and Senior Advisors for Strategic Initiatives at WuXi Biotech. Over the next several sessions, panelists from Germany, Switzerland, United Kingdom, Ireland, Singapore, Korea, Japan, and Israel share views about local ecosystems and the opportunities and challenges in finding healthcare solutions for patients. How can we promote and foster innovation beyond borders? What barriers do we need to overcome to be successful in creating global solutions for global challenges? How will we drive sustainability of efforts regionally and globally? Let's begin the Innovation Spotlight with a conversation on neglected diseases. The forum is devoted to partnership for patients, exploring how fundamental insights in science and advances in technology may impact prevention, diagnosis, and treatment of diseases such as cancer and Alzheimer's disease. We need to find sustainable ways that create medicines that will be available and affordable to patients. But what about neglected diseases? Billions of people live under the constant barrage of healthcare problems arising from malaria, hookworm, and tuberculosis, amongst others. More than 1/6 of the world's population are infected with one or more of the neglected diseases. These diseases contribute to immense social and economic burden arising from blindness, physical disabilities, malnutrition, amongst many other considerations. How can we better address the needs to access better and more affordable medicines for patients? What kind of catalysts are needed to bring our ecosystem together to achieve measurable impact? Do we need to reshape our approach to bring better global healthcare to patients impacted by neglected diseases? So with me for this discussion is Jenny Yip, Managing Partner at Adjuvant Capital. Welcome, Jenny.
Thanks, Rich, for having me.
So the first thing we'd like to ask is Adjuvant recently had raised a $300 million venture round for improving public health, including neglected diseases, and participating in that fund is Merck, Novartis, so these are typical large pharmaceutical companies, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Children's Investment Foundation, Doris and Duke Charitable Fund, Ford Foundation, MacArthur Foundation, amongst others. So what's the vision of the fund and how will the capital be deployed? How will success be measured?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Rich. I think the vision of adjuvant capital is really to invest in clinical innovations to tackle massive global health challenges. We invest in companies that are doing product research and development for drugs, vaccines, medical devices, and diagnostics for high burden infectious diseases and sexual and reproductive health. And what we had found before founding Adjuvant was that there were lots and lots of grant capital funding very early stage innovations, science coming out of academic labs or medical institutions. But really the venture capital community were not taking these de-risk programs and de-risk assets, forming companies, investing in them for the path of commercialization in lower and middle income countries. And that's really the vision of Adjuvant. It's really to take these very early stage de-risk innovations and expanding them such that these products can be delivered into low resource settings.
How will you measure success at the end of the funds? Typically, we tend to have very, particular pricing regimens, et cetera. So how will the companies recoup?
Yeah, so Adjuvant explicitly is, you can call us a double bottom line fund, an impact investment fund, whatever it may be, but we hold in equal regard generating top tier financial returns for our LPs and also generating healthcare impact returns. And I realize that, that is a little bit of your have your cake and eat it too fund, but that is the high standards that we set for ourselves. And how we do that is, of course, we really develop bespoke investment theses where generating a healthcare return or healthcare impact return is synonymous with its business mission or business strategy.
What are some of the overarching themes they have for the investment strategies they're developing over at Adjuvant?
Yeah, so going back to my comments about tackling global health challenges is when we're thinking about investing to solve or to prevent infectious disease, we really think of investing in innovations in drugs, vaccines because they're preventative, and also diagnostics such that we know what the disease burden is. I also think about investing in women's health and sexual and reproductive health because similarly, if you're investing in say a contraceptive, you're preventing a pregnancy that hopefully will occur later on in life as a woman chooses. But it's thinking about prevention and treatments as well.
Are you looking at particular kinds of technologies to invest in?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a portfolio of vaccine development platform technologies, diagnostics technologies, and we really think of this as a platform approach in many circumstances. And what I mean by that is you may have one technology that could have applications in both infectious disease or say oncology, or you may have a diagnostic platform that can test infectious diseases or also cancer or non-invasive prenatal testing. And so when we think about kind of dual indications, that also translates quite well into dual markets.
Can you give us a high-level view of the kinds of technologies that you are investing in, and with some examples? I mean, you have examples that you can provide us?
Sure, of course. We have a diagnostics company or a diagnostics investment in a company called ChromaCode, and they are a San Diego-based diagnostic developer. And essentially what they have is they have an AI-enabled technology and software paired with a set of specialty reagents. They're able to increase the throughput of a digital PCR machine very, very easily from singleplex or lowplex into midplex. And why that is actually really relevant for lower and middle income countries and our disease markets is because there's a wide PCR installed base around the world, something like 80 to 100,000 PCR machines, anywhere from centralized labs all the way to smaller labs in say second or third tier cities in lower and middle income countries. And if you can increase the throughput while maintaining the same workflow and really the same technicians or the technical skills, you're essentially decreasing the cost and increasing the efficiency of some of these PCR machines. And then more so on top of that, because you don't have this kind of upfront CapEx requirement in buying a box that could be small or big into some of these centralized labs, we think that this kind of product or this target market is really viable for our constituents.
There are unique challenges that you face when going into markets like this?
Oh gosh, yeah, every challenge that you could think of, and whether it, securing supplies and reagents and getting the right customs forms and the registrations and licensures going into some of these markets, it's just simply it's a more fragmented market, and sometimes there are more hurdles to jump through.
Let's say, by the very nature, adjuvant capital is embracing partnerships and collaboration. How important are those characteristics towards the success of these investments?
Yeah, absolutely. And this may be a little bit of a cliche, Rich, but I always say that when you're trying to grow a portfolio company, it's like raising a child, and it takes a village. And where we sit at Advent is, of course, we're an investor, we're a venture capital firm, but we have in our ecosystem, in our network, various constituents, like our LPs, who are really the gorillas in global health, and not just investing, but just global health players in general. So when we are, sitting in a room full of board members and co-investors, we're, very, very comfortable engaging with the investment community. But similarly, as we walk the halls of Seattle at the Gates Foundation or the Wellcome Trust in London, et cetera, we're also comfortable engaging in the nonprofit, philanthropic, and academic community. And it's really all of these various constituents and networks and relationships that we bring to our portfolio companies. And sometimes we play a little bit of a translator as well in making sure that each side understands what's going on and what they can contribute.
So Jenny, you mentioned that it takes a village to take on these issues, but do you have all the elements of the village together to tackle this?
Yeah, and it's a great question, Rich. And no, I don't think we have all the elements just yet. And that's a little bit part of why I'm so excited about the future of Adjuvant. I would love no more than my investors and my venture capital colleagues to co-invest alongside with Adjuvant in some of these infectious disease companies or sexual and reproductive health companies. And some people may think of that as competition for deals, but I really don't. There's a lot to tackle and a lot to bite off, and I invite my colleagues in the DC community to join me.
And the partnerships that you've established with, let's say, the Gates Foundation and others, in the ones that I mentioned earlier, have there been unique, let's say, associations that have developed from that?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's anywhere from helping us, assess the technical and scientific, capabilities or potential of a company, all the way to post-investment, when we establish what we call, joint steering committees to ensure that the global health impact gets into the countries that we're talking about. We oftentimes invite members of our stakeholder community, LP community, to join us in some of that work, and they have a lot to bring.
Now, thinking about some of the challenges which you might have in going into these, let's say, developing nations, for example, you can imagine that refrigeration may be a problem, for example. Could you discuss a little bit more, maybe some of the objectives that you might have in some of the technologies that you would invest in driving towards these developing nations, for example?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, Adjuvant is a clinical stage investor, right? So we're not necessarily making investments that are, distributing on the ground or anything like that just yet. But we think oftentimes about the delivery constraints and what is actually relevant and applicable for some of these markets. And Rich, you brought up a great point about just refrigeration. And of course, COVID is still top of mind for everybody in the world. And the refrigeration requirements necessary for some of the vaccines that are currently in the market are really, really tough. You don't necessarily have ultra cold storage in some parts of sub-Saharan Africa. And so when we think about, what the TPP is, what the relevance and the applicability is in lower middle income countries, we target those technologies. And sometimes what we help our companies and our CEOs do is have that kind of product profile or the delivery requirements in mind as you're thinking about your clinical development path. And that is really, really important.
So Jenny, do you consider local considerations with respect to the investments that you make? In other words, a particular region of the world might have a particular problem, let's say, and it will be local to that in terms of delivering a particular healthcare solution.
Yes, absolutely. We think about that and local demand and local requirements. And I'll give you kind of a specific example. If we're targeting infectious disease, of course, there are infectious diseases that are global, like COVID, of course, HIV, TB, malaria, that are endemic in many regions of the world. But there are also, smaller prevalence or lower prevalence infectious disease that may be more regional or more local. And so by definition of targeting some of these local diseases, I actually do think, yes, local healthcare is very local, and we think about that all the time. The other way that we think about being local is one technology or one drug may be able to solve a disease that is global, but the delivery of that or some of the cultural acceptance considerations of that drug or vaccine or contraceptive could be very, very local. And so we think about all of those things. We have to expand, we have to think very high, 100,000 foot, and also 10 feet sometimes.
From the fund, the $300 million fund that you have, how many companies do you expect to start with that?
Yeah, so Advent has been deploying capital for about 18 months now, and we have 14 portfolio companies. But I would anticipate by the time we're all said and done, we're going to be at the 20 to 25 company mark.
Perfect. All right. So what's the vision of the fund in terms of what you'd like to accomplish?
Yeah, no, so of course on the micro side, I think about these things as micro and macro. On the micro side, of course, we want to be able to support our portfolio companies in their product research and development path. And so if we can see a portfolio of products that are FDA approved, CE marked, et cetera, being delivered in some of these lower middle income countries, I think that would just be fantastic, and that would fulfill one of the visions of the fund. But I think a secondary vision would be, or a second vision would be that we spur, more investment into global infectious diseases and global health. And then going back to my comment about, it takes a village to raise a child, and we need more investors around the table. I would love to see more Advent capitals out there in 20 to 25 years.
What inspires you every day, and what drives you to be involved in our industry in this kind of initiative over at Advent?
Yeah, I think at heart, I'm a little bit of an idealist. So, I went into healthcare, went into global health, really wanting to impact the lives of those who are, less addicted or who are more disadvantaged than I am. I stood in San Francisco. I grew up in Canada and in the US, obviously. But I also understand that we're connected by this global health community. And if there's somebody who is suffering from a disease or a condition that has already been either eradicated or easily treated in the US, I think at its core, there's an ethical question and unfairness in that I'm trying to rectify.
Hey, terrific. Thank you very much. I don't have any more questions at this point. I want to thank I want to thank Jenny so much for participating today and giving me the opportunity to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rich. Thanks for having me.
Please welcome our next panel, Germany, Translating Scientific Excellence, featuring Marianne de Backer, Head of Strategy, Business Development and Licensing, member of the Pharmaceuticals Executive Committee, Bayer. Bernd Gergen, Partner, High-Tech Gründerfonds. Markus Kotzka, Chief Executive Officer, Abelos Therapeutics. Jonas Sapuntzis, Corporate Senior Vice President and Global Head of Business Development and Licensing, Boehringer Ingelheim. Our session leader is Carolyn Shu, Co-Founder and Chief Executive Officer, Regeneron.
Welcome, everyone. So for today's panel discussion, we will talk about Germany, translation the excellent in science for patients. We would like to really learn some insights from the panelists we gathered today, and to discuss really also about how Germany's contributions are to the global healthcare ecosystem. So there are really good conditions in Germany. Germany is one of the country with the highest R&D spending. Germany is known for its excellence in science in academia. So we want to discuss, has there been already a success formula with also the recent highlights in Germany, such as BioNTech and CureVac? We also would like to discuss with our panelists about a few other important topics, such as areas of innovation and science in Germany, the strengths and the challenges. One of the topics like financing. And last but not least, it's also about people, about the talents, people, and the mindset of the biotech and pharma in Germany. So with this, it's really great pleasure, and also want to have a brief introduction of our panelists. It would be good to have a few sentences of the self-introduction from each other here. Miriam, may we start with you? Could you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Sure. Hi, everyone, and a real pleasure to be here. My name is Marianne de Backer. I'm the Global Head of Strategy, Business Development and Licensing at Bayer Pharmaceuticals, and I'm also a member of the Executive Committee at Bayer Pharmaceuticals. I joined the company about a year and a half ago, and before that I was 28 years with Johnson & Johnson. My last role there being also the Global Head of Mergers and Acquisitions, Operations and Divestitures. I actually lived the past 5 years in Silicon Valley, and I moved last year to Berlin. So I think I have a great perspective to bring on how the innovation ecosystem in the US is different from what I see here in Germany, and what all the pros and cons are of both environments. I also am on the board of a number of organizations. One is a research institute in San Francisco called the Gladstone Foundation. That is actually the home to two Nobel Prize winners, Jen Doudna, and also the Nobel Prize winner of the first stem cell use. I'm also on the board of Arrowhead Pharmaceuticals and on the board of Kronos Bio. So really a pleasure to be here today.
Thank you, Marianne. Thank you. And then we move to also to Ben. Ben has from the venture capital angle. So Ben, would you like to tell a little bit about yourself?
Yes, thank you very much, Caroline. My name is Bernd Görgen. I'm partner with the life science team of Huatai Gründerfonds. Huatai Gründerfonds exists since 2005, originally founded as a private-public partnership. And we're now in our third fund generation, and with 900 million under management, we probably belong to the group of the biggest seed funds in Europe. Personally, I'm a biologist by training, and after my PhD, I added a little postdoc time, and after that, I moved to the industry, worked for 7 years in diagnostics marketing, and afterwards 7 years in investment banking, until in 2008, I joined Huatai Gründerfonds. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Now to Marcus. Marcus, you have both corporate VC experiences and also entrepreneurial experiences. Tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
Yes. So welcome and thanks I'm happy to participate today. My name is Marcus Koska. I'm a molecular biologist by training, and I'm the CEO of BioLabs Therapeutics. The company was founded in 2019 in the area of anti-tumoral therapy with arena viruses. Before I was 23 years at Boehringer Ingelheim in different positions, more than 10 years in research. And then a couple of days in project management, where I learned to translate also compound development to clinical development. And I was the last 5 years then partner in the corporate venture fund. Currently, I think that's what you mentioned about. So knowing the pharma company, how it works, so the investment part, but also then now going on into an active role as CEO of a company.
Thank you, Marcus. Now to Yannis. Now, Marcus was your colleague at BI, so back to you. So tell us a little bit about you.
Thank you, Alice. Yeah, a pleasure being here today. My name is Yannis Afunsis, and I'm heading business development and licensing for BI for our human pharma business, which is the major business of BI still, but only one of 3 businesses that we're focusing on top of animal health and our CDMO business. Where I'm a chemist by training, and I started my career in the pharmaceutical industry as a chemist before I then, more than 10 years ago, started to get more and more excited about what external innovation can bring forward, and moved then to early academic and technology partnerships before then going into business development and licensing. And for a bit more than 2 years, I'm heading now business development and licensing globally for BI. I was for a couple of years also in the US, and before that in our research center in Vienna. And I think it's a pleasure to be here today and discuss with all of these colleagues and also friends like Marcus about the German ecosystem and how we can really differentiate, but maybe also see things that are of benefit for people across the world and where we can share experiences and have a good conversation.
Thank you, Yannis. Thank you very much. It's really great to have you all here. Maybe also just a few sentences about myself. My name is Caroline Xu. I'm the co-founder and CEO of VGeneral. VGeneral is a spin-off of the Ludwig Maximilian University in Munich. And VGeneral actually is focusing really to develop the next generation gene therapies to treat ophthalmic diseases with very high unmet needs, as well as partnering with the leading biopharma companies in other disease areas. So myself actually was trained as a pharmacologist, and I actually got the training in Shanghai, in Munich, and in New York. And then I moved it also then also did my MBA and I moved it to also the management side. And I spent about 10 years actually at another big pharma company in Basel with Novartis. And that before that, I was also at a management consulting company. So it's always our passion really to bring the innovations to patients. And I think that's probably what we share here. And it's really great to have all this privilege to have you on this panel to talk about also the excellent in science to bring that to the global patients. So with this, I think we come to really some of the discussion. We want to hear your thoughts and your insights. So we are in this healthcare driven by science and innovations. And Germany was once considered as the pharmacy of the world. And the recent, actually, in this pandemic, especially with the recent success stories of BioNTech and CureVac, the awareness for the German innovations and the biotech industry is rising again. So my question here to open this discussion, do you see this recent success as earned or coincidental? Or even more, is there any specific success formula for Germany to contribute to bring these innovations to patients? Maybe let's start with Miriam. Miriam, Bio has also partnership with CureVac. Is there anything you want to share also for, from this angle as well?
Sure, I would love to. It's certainly not a coincidence, right? I mean, the level and the quality of science, academic science here in Germany is incredibly high. But if you look at the two sort of, real success stories that we talk about, every single day almost now out of Germany, being BioNTech and also CureVac, I mean, those are two German pioneers who were backed by, really private investors, right? On the one case, the Strongman brothers, on the other man, Dietmar Hopp, really billionaires who, were ready to take a huge risk. At the time, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, where obviously mRNA was not, it was really not clear whether it was going to lead to anything, but they were willing to bet on science, and they were willing to invest significant money in innovation. In the case of Dietmar Hopp, right, almost more than $1 billion in CureVac. And I think, again, there is no shortage of fantastic science in Germany. There's fantastic academic centers. What we really can do more of, I think, here in Germany is really translating that fantastic science that is happening into business opportunities. So obviously, in the case of BioNTech out of the Germany of Mainz and CureVac out of Tübingen University, I mean, there's all this great science happening in academic centers and academic research, and we need to create an environment where that research is being translated into, early startups, creating funding, make sure that there are capabilities and management that can help these companies think about how to progress their science. So I think what we are really, of course, not seeing here as much as, obviously that is the case in the United States, is the access to capital, to professional management, to entrepreneurs who are willing to take the leap of faith and take the risk to set up companies. But again, I think the sort of early nucleus of fantastic science is absolutely here in Germany, and it will just be a matter of finding a way to develop these ecosystems where we can make that translation happen more often, and also when, you know, there's not just billionaires behind it, but there's more differentiated sources of capital being made available to make that happen.
Thank you. Thank you, Marianne. That's really very helpful. And maybe that's coming also to Ben. You know, you have been also in the seed financing and really also have been very much involved, really doing the translation of science into the business. What's your view? And would you see this now, the recent highlights?
I have to say that I joined Marianne and everything she said was right. However, I do believe that COVID-19 shed some extra light on these two companies and on other companies active in that field. And 10 years ago, there were only a few people that were interested in virology. And if you asked me, let's say 15 months ago, whether CureVac and BioNTech would become so famous, I would have said, no way. Virology is not that focused. But it shows now the power of platforms that they were able to use their platform to develop something that is of great help for the whole world. It also shows the power of cooperation, because CureVac is not doing it alone. BioNTech is not bringing the vaccine to the market on their own, and that's what we have to keep in mind.
Thank you. And actually, maybe also come to that from our entrepreneurial perspective. So Marcus, anything you want to share to see this, what is happening?
Yeah, I agree also there with Mariana. I see this really that in principle, the successes now that we see are clearly earned. Yeah, is really a long run. Yeah, and if you really talk, for instance, to Ingmar, one of the founders of CureVac, when he started his speeches or so, when I discussed with him, I think it's clear that the beginning was really hard for them. Yeah, to really see to find seed money and all this stuff. Yeah, we're incubated in the University of Tübingen and started there and grow over time. And I think the key is really that the science, and that I completely also there agree with Marianne. Science is always really the key, yeah, and bringing then new innovative stuff to the knowledge and understanding of investors is really a very often very hard job. Yeah, I think he mentioned, and starting with mRNA, where he said, everybody told us from the investor side, mRNA, why it's so crazy, it's so unstable. Therefore, he started always by saying mRNA is the stablest molecule ever. The nature even created a molecule to break this down. So this gives some example that is really not easy with new technologies to find an investors, convince them for the new endeavors. I think there really the science is great, and I also completely agree to that. Really, the translation is a part we need to learn more. And one of the key aspects, in my view, are really the people here in Germany that have also the experience. If we give you an example, in Avalos Therapeutics, we have a leadership team of 3 people, myself with biotech and also industrial experience, how to set up also companies, but also the CSO, really more than 20 years in pharma, really knowing what is really needed to do that. And also the manufacturing point of view, we have a CTO on board that really knows what is required there. So we have a mixture of young people, really interested, motivated, but we have also people then on board in the leadership team that really knowing what is really to do. And this is not that often seen, unfortunately, in Germany currently. That's, I think, is a pity. I hope this will then also encourage now people with the new successes really to enter, maybe like I did after 23 years, really from pharma in starting an endeavor in a biotech company. I hope this will be inspiring them, and we will see this much more in the future.
And maybe just to re-emphasize, right? I mean, all this innovation, before the time it gets translated into something that is really valuable to patients, it takes a lot of time, right? I mean, CureVac started 21 years ago, right? Moderna started 11 years ago, BioNTech, I think 13 years ago. So this has all taken quite a bit of time, and you need to, secure a lot of financing and enthusiastic talent to be able to get this far, right? So I think you need a lot of determination to continue on this path, and especially in an area that is totally new, you have to fight against a lot of naysayers who might not believe in the innovation or in the technology. So I think, again, we will come to the topic, I'm sure, but finding the capital, the risk capital, that allows you to take that time to develop something into something meaningful for patients is critically important.
Very good.
And I think if I could just add, a lot of things have been said, but there's one, I think, important factor here. Neither BioNTech nor CureVac started to cure the COVID-19 pandemic. They started somewhere completely different. And so this is what I think we need to understand, and where an ecosystem has to help entrepreneurs to drive their ideas without really knowing today what this will do, because I'm convinced this is absolutely earned, what has happened in this space right now. But it takes a lot of courage. It takes a bit of a stubbornness to think about your idea, and it takes early funding like the HTGF provides, and it takes also something like the pandemic, a spotlight that tells you why this technology now can shine and show. And I think what we should also not forget, and this is where I feel the pandemic shows a very good light on this, is some other technologies that we were betting on for many, many years in the vaccine business just didn't seem to work so well. So I think it's this plethora of opportunities that you need to incubate and then find the right problem for this solution that you offer. And it's not always straightforward. And I think that's something that is a story that is much easier told hindsight than forward looking. And when you talk to the founders of CureVac and BioNTech, they will tell you that that was not the idea that they had in mind. They knew that this could help also in fighting or in creating an immune response against viruses, but it was not the only goal that they had when they put this in mind. So I think that's really the wonderful piece of a working ecosystem where you have entrepreneurs, great science, and then all the other ingredients that put this together, and then something that allows you to shine and show how your idea is valuable that gets picked up.
Good. We just want to say that as an ingredients, that's probably the success formulas that we are talking. And this comes really, as I said, we're pretty much on the same page about really the key ingredients to make this impact, to bring this happen. So maybe that's the three topics. Maybe we can go a little bit deep dive here. So the first topic about really the science and innovation. The second is really important, how to translate the science innovation. Maybe financing is very important to bring that forward. And the third thing, I think Marcus again mentioned about really the people, the experiences, the ecosystem that need to come together to support that, the mindset of this industry to bring that science finally to the patients that we want to go for. So maybe with this, I think we would definitely agree to have this discussion now, deep dive a little bit more into these three topics. Maybe let's start again with the science, and then we all know that's where we start, in the science and innovation. I put the question first actually to Marcus. So, especially from the entrepreneur and looking really at the science and innovations, what is now Germany's strong in terms of science and innovation from your perspective?
Yeah, so there are different areas, but if I look into what is currently going on, and you can see one example with the other laws, we are working on viruses, fighting against cancer. Your Caroline and your company in the gene therapy field. I think also there a lot will come with viruses treating different kinds of diseases. We are really at the beginning here to understand this. Also with regard to gene therapies, this will be I think a big field on that. If we look then now, everyone is in mind with mRNA, but when at my time at a partner there at Boehringer Ingelheim Venture Funds, for instance, we spun out a company with a microRNA, antisense microRNA. Yeah, so this will be also, and this is just a beginning field. Yeah, so we are talking about maybe long non-coding RNAs. It's never the scientists they are talking about that, but I think there will be a lot of going on also in Germany. We have really excellent and brilliant experts in this field, and looking for that. I think there are other topics, obviously, but people talking longer on microbiome or something like that. I think there are also topics where it's going on. Stem cells, I think all these huge area where maybe also indication like Huntington's disease or something like that are really not treatable currently, and also there we have really a very good community in this area. So there are a lot of different topics where Germany and the science, and as Marianne mentioned, I think this is really the starting point. This is the starting point of innovation, the basic science and the understanding of the generation or the trigger of the disease, and then you can develop the therapeutic concept. But I think in a nutshell, I think these are, at least in my point of view, really important areas where also Germany is really strong.
Excellent, thank you. Maybe also then put a little bit further question for Marianne and Yannis both. So, you know, if we talk about the pandemic that really now give a kind of a spotlight, and would you see this happen in other disease areas or in other technology that we now see the spotlight we see for the recent highlights? Maybe Marianne, would you like to start?
Yes, no, absolutely. The silver lining of a terrible pandemic, right, that killed 2.5 million people, it is for sure that, you know, biotech has gone mainstream. I mean, there's no one in the world that isn't talking about science and biotech, and there's, you know, a tremendous amount of investor dollars that are floating to the broader biotech space. And if you look at, of course, you know, companies like BioNTech and CureVac and Moderna, and everyone that plays in the mRNA field has, you know, obviously benefited from that. But if you actually look into last year, then you see that the entire biotech sector has tremendously benefited from, you know, that environment. I mean, 51 billion was invested last year just across US and EU in healthcare. So, I mean, that means, and if you look at where, it's predominantly in oncology, it's predominantly in rare diseases, it's predominantly in platforms. So I think that really bodes well for our industry. That means that a lot of investment is going into innovation. Of course, in Europe, less, right? It's about 8 billion, I think, across all of Europe. But nevertheless, I mean, there's more dollars, more euros going into innovation across different geographies. And that innovation, I mean, it might not be clear right now, as was mentioned, you know, there's a lot of investment into platforms, but at some point, you know, that will be translated into something that is hopefully going to be benefiting patients. I also really want to emphasize that, you know, healthcare is one of the biggest challenges we face as a society, and there's a whole bio-revolution going on. I mean, there's not a day that goes by, or there's some, you know, new finding and new science that can change the way that we would develop a product or offer care to patients. There's a lot of added complexity, the pace is increased, but also you have a lot of technology and pharma and biotech coming together. So you have a lot of digital transformation at the same time. And I think that coming together of, you know, a bio-revolution, if you want, and a technological revolution is something that is going to create, you know, great new opportunities. And we have, you know, a lot of that in Germany as well. You know, we have great tech incubators. We have, you know, a number of good biotech incubators. Ourselves, we have a collaborator with about 10 companies that we are incubating in Berlin. So, you know, I think we need to make sure that we can bring that biology and that technology also closer together, because it's really at that interface that also a lot is happening, especially in the US, but I'm hopeful also more and more here in Europe.
Very good, thank you. Yannis, anything else you want to say about this?
I put a slightly different perspective to this. I think one thing that the pandemic has shown us is how much we can really drive things forward when there is a collaboration across the world, being it between biotech and big pharma, being it with the authorities, being it with everybody. You know, there was something that was unleashed, and that's the power of science and the power of people working together to address a disease. And I hope that this will teach us something. Look at the timelines that we were able to cut down basically on all of this. Look at how we were able to really provide the funding for all of this. And hopefully we can keep some of this momentum, because it's not only the pandemic that is keeping, or it has a very tight grip on us, but there are other patients waiting for innovation every day. And so we have to make sure that we take some of this momentum and drive it forward. I'm very confident that we can, but as we said, we need collaboration across all of the partners of the ecosystem. It's the incubators, it's the funding, it's everything. And it happens across the world. I think that's also something that we have seen, that it's really companies across the globe working together to help. And that's also very, very important. And we look at this and want to be a part of this ecosystem, being it through our venture fund that Marcus had also mentioned, where we really go into new areas, being it through our internal research organization or business development and licensing, where we partner early on with academics or with biotechs to help bring capabilities together where 1 and 1 is more than 2, or also through, you know, more just being out there, sharing knowledge, sharing information with the ecosystem, and not only in Germany, not only in Europe, across the world. I think this is happening. And a trend that I am seeing is that while we always compare investment volumes in the US, maybe in other geographies in Asia and in Europe, I think it's also cost that we have to keep in mind. And it's still a seed round in Europe that is a bit lower, still takes you quite a long way, it seems like. And maybe Bernd, you can talk about this point. And I think we just need to make sure that we keep this momentum and keep investing into technologies, into areas that are underserved, because the patients can't wait. And that's what we have to really make sure we are driving this innovation forward.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. And I do actually think it goes further. I think, you know, the only way, again, to tackle our healthcare challenges is extreme collaboration. And it's only going to be the companies or the groups or whatever the entities are that are going to become really good at collaborating and at networking and at operating within ecosystems that are going to be successful. Because, I mean, our field is just too complex, and it's impossible for just one company to have a solution to any of the problems that we are faced with. And anything that we want to bring as a solution to patients. So that collaboration theme is, I think, unbelievably important.
Yeah, totally agree.
Perhaps I can add some more words, because we've talked a lot about science, but to me, science is just the very first step to turn innovations into a business. If you only concentrate on science, you end up with a car with no wheels, no engine. You need money for that. You need collaborative partners like Bayer, like Boehringer, like many other companies, smaller or big ones or mid-sized ones. And you need wonderful entrepreneurs, people having the experience like Marcus, and at the same time the courage to move from the industry into a startup company. That's not a very natural step, at least not in Germany, unfortunately, and not yet. I think that's getting better. And if I take a look at our own portfolio, we've got over 110 life science companies in our portfolio, and the relative ratio of drug developing companies is constantly growing within the last couple of years, which is due to many different factors. And one thing I wanted to add as well is we are just focusing in this discussion on therapeutics. Don't let us forget prevention, diagnostics, hospital, and home care. All that is necessary to improve our healthcare system. Healthcare is a very important part, but it's not the only one.
Indeed. Yes, I think we tackle this as healthcare as a comprehensive system. It's about partnership. It's this ecosystem everyone contribute. Actually, I started also what you said. Really, science is great. That's actually we're starting that, but it will not automatically turn into really the impact that we can bring to the patients. And then translating the science is actually quite really something that we definitely wanted to talk again, actually, Brent, with you. So you talk about you seek fund financing, and I think some of you know this actually from some of the industry report. In 2019, 29 startup companies started in Germany. And out of this 29, 40% actually is a drug developer. So the birth rate in Germany, translating from academic to the business or to the startup, is really rather low. So what are the drivers for this translating this excellent science into business and startup companies?
I have to admit that the first and most important point is money. If you need very good teams, you need very good scientists in a team, in a startup team, and in order to motivate them to build up their own company, you need to make sure that the first financing is just bigger than 500,000 euros. Sometimes it works with that. We have excellent examples. For example, our last exit was a company called Tumor. They made an entry inhibitor against hepatitis Delta and potentially hepatitis B, and that one has been acquired, or at least the signing of that acquisition took place in December for over 1.4 billion euros. But that's a huge exception. Today, people need more money to even begin. And if you want to motivate good people to form a company together, the seed rounds are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So we need people that are patient enough, smart enough, and rich enough, actually, to invest in those projects. We share, for example, I think 6 or 7 projects together with the Boehringer Ingelheim Venture Fund, which is a privilege for us because we get much more than just money. We get expertise as well. And I don't know how many projects we have together with the Bayer. It's a much lower number. However, Bayer is also one of our investors, and we enjoy having Bayer on board. What we can see is that there are a lot more funds that are now concentrating on Europe, on early stage investment. And this is attractive for many founders to leave the university or take over a part-time responsibility in a startup, and that thus it's getting better and better and better. It's like a spiral turning upwards, and that helps a lot. I'm really excited to see what's happening in the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, but maybe one comment on that because I think money is important, Bernd. I agree to you. But I think maybe let it shed some light on them from a different angle, and maybe let's term it like a cultural and communication topic, because you have, on the one hand, you have the researchers are really deep into the details, yeah, but obviously not that much understanding how drug development is working. And then you need to have, let's say, at least if you have a look at it, maybe a bit of an understanding how maybe a therapeutic concept then should look like, how a bit to translate then and to understand how to translate this. There are really people with experience looking at that and say, okay, wow, this is really fantastic. But the scientists sometimes they go, oh, yeah, it's a fantastic science, but maybe they do not do the next step in translating this. And then I think compared also to other countries like in the US, but also in Europe, I think Germany is not best in this translating. Yeah, I think it's good in the innovation. You see this also, a lot of patents are there, but I think maybe it's a cultural and communication part in one aspect. Yeah, that really experienced people bring this together in a business plan and say, okay, well, now we start with this therapeutic concept, and this is now really needed in order to make at the end of the day a drug. And this is then really an important aspect, Bernd, that in addition to that is really required for this translation.
Yeah,
I couldn't agree more. That's absolutely right.
Yeah, culture is so incredibly important, right? As I mentioned in the beginning, I lived the past 5 years in Silicon Valley, and if you speak even with students at university, everyone is looking to set up their own company. The glass is always half full. People are ready to take risk. There's of course, plenitude of capital available to also do that, but there's also this spirit of entrepreneurship there that is very different from what we typically have here as Europeans. And I think that, being comfortable with taking risk and starting your own business, I mean, that's not something that we, typically get accustomed with while we are still, at university completing our studies. But I mean, I have 2 teenage sons that went to school there, obviously, and I mean, they built their own computer. They started their little venture. I mean, that would never have happened if we would have stayed here in Europe. So I think that cultural setting and that mindset of, just trying something out and see how things go and get together and get something started, I think that is different. And also it gets applauded, right? If you, in the US start a venture and you fail, there's nothing wrong with that. People say, okay, wow, you have, gotten a great learning. And that is also something that we can, I think, learn from here in Europe. There's nothing wrong with failure, right? I mean, if we try something and it doesn't pan out, we can move on to the next thing. But again, that comfort with taking risk, and of course, combined with the availability of capital, I think that is something where we can make some strides.
Yeah, I think I couldn't agree more, Marianne, that this is a cultural topic that we have to face. How do we deal with failure? And I think it's always easier said to change this. I think it's really something that we need to bring up early on. But I think there's also 2 points that Bernd mentioned, which I just thought is something that is a strength of the European ecosystem. Sometimes it's patience. I think you have to be patient. It's good to have money, but it's very important to have patient investors. And I think Bernd is very, very patient because our industry takes some time. It's not that you can turn things around very, very quickly. And I think what you also need is you need that passion from the people who drive this forward, together with a patient investor and the knowledge that you bring together to then drive something forward. And I think we are seeing many, many great examples where people take that part. I think, Caroline, you mentioned that you had a spin out of the LMU University. We see more and more of these spin outs happening and then really going into global collaborations almost. I think there is more and more happening, but it still needs to be grown patiently. I think our industry takes some time, and we can't turn this around from one day to another. And I think we have a lot of very, very good ingredients in place. And we just need to make sure that we put enough fertilization on it, which may be the money, but it's also a lot of other things.
That's true. Now, what we're saying is translating this excellence in science. It's actually empower, need to also have the financing part, but also need to have the knowledge and the team with experiences, with the courage, with the mindset to do so. And then let me actually come to this actually again to maybe Marianne. So it's especially for the investor, I mean financing part of it. So what do you see actually? What need to happen? What will be necessary to build this ecosystem for investors in Germany?
So if your question is how can we do more of that translation and that investing such that we build companies more in Germany, right, or in Europe, then I would say there's a couple of different things. So first of all, it's not necessarily the case that there is a lack of funding for startups. For example, in Germany, there's more than 7 billion a year available for startups, but only a very small piece, only 1.5% of that goes to biotech. So I'm really hopeful that, again, with the pandemic and with biotech going mainstream and everyone seeing what an incredible impact science can have and biotech can have, that more of that investment money is now really going to go also to biotech. So coming from private investors, coming from public investors, and coming from corporate investors. So for us at Bayer, we have a corporate investment arm called Leaps by Bayer, and we are extremely active. We are the top five investor, corporate investor in the world. So we invest very heavily in innovation, also here, obviously in Germany and in Europe. So I think if the venture capital community can, do more, there's, also vehicles being created now that make it very easy for earlier startups to go public. So we might talk about, the fact that we have this incredible increase in SPACs, which, will allow private companies to seek public capital in a much faster and easier way. And it's happening also not just in gaming and IT, but also really in our biotech sector now. So I think there's a number of different ways actually that we can create more access to capital. But I think the most important thing is that, again, we create ecosystems. It is an environment that needs to come together where you have academic research, you have biotechs, you have the government, you have the private sector such as Bayer and others, and we all come together in an ecosystem, because innovation needs to happen somewhere, and the innovators need to be able to focus on their science, but at the same time there needs to be this equilibrium where everyone can exchange information, and that's the way that things really get translated. So what we are now trying to do, for example, with Bayer headquartered in Berlin, is really to build a stronger ecosystem and to see how can we help through creating an incubator for companies, through making our LEAPS equity available, setting up our own companies, creating new codes, working very closely together with academia and working very closely together with the hospitals. How can we create an ecosystem where that innovation will have a real chance and can really thrive? And I think if we can create it, and there are already, but if we can have a number of these, innovation hubs within Germany, that would be very beneficial, and that will automatically attract more investment, both on the private side as well on the public side.
Thank you very much, Marianne. I think that's actually, you talk about a few also the innovation hubs, and in Berlin or Munich, Heidelberg, that's really excellent science, also ecosystem that's building up. We also have heard, really, there's always the challenges about really bring actually further into the clinical study. The gap is they really, science translated, and then still there's a gap to the patients. So maybe that's actually a question I want to ask also of Ben, also from your perspective. How do you see this further, to bring this further to the patients? Is it probably financing, but also the people experiences, the management team need to have that also, know-how, execution power to make it happen. Maybe Ben, would you like to share from that further?
Yeah, and hopefully my answer doesn't sound boring, but I'm coming back to money again, because Germany has become a lot better due to the help of many different people in the early stage financing all over the high-tech places, including biotech. Yeah, you can argue that there is too little money in biotech. Yeah, I would subscribe to that, to be honest, but other people have different opinions. What we are really still bad at is growth financing. We need, in order to bring a drug to a patient, we need to have bigger companies as well. Like, for example, BioNTech, and Gilbert will show it in the near future as well. If you want to be able to get the registration, market your own drug, you need a lot of money. You need a lot of patients as well, sure, but where do you get the next 200, 300 million from? That's not necessarily from the VC scene. So some of these companies, after a proof of concept, are condemned more or less to license their products out after, let's say, phase 2A or phase 2B. But if we want to be able to finance the phase 3, or getting registration, getting market approval, building up your own sales team, you need a lot more money. And therefore, the German markets are not yet really suitable. And the home stock market is not really receptive for biotech IPOs, unlike in the US. So it's clear, if I was a biotech startup today, I would look where I find my best peer group, where are most of the investors, where do I find the most knowledgeable investors. That's where I would go. And that's not necessarily Germany, currently at least. So we have to change something there. And if there is more growth money available, I'm very sure that the knowledge here in Germany is good enough and big enough to build big companies being able to bring product also to the patient.
Thank you. And as we come to that point, a few companies really integrated, becoming really bring that to the patients. Also, one active example in my neighborhood is Morphosis that I really can make that probably also into the market. Maybe
Sure.
just some of the question about also Janus, you know, you also have a BI has a corporate venture as well as Marcus worked on there too. So what's your strategy also, you know, to support the company to grow or buy them? So what is your strategy from your corporate VC? Maybe Janus first, then Marcus, please, second to add.
And I think, of course, it is to help grow ideas, right? That's what we do, and when every venture money is out there to invest into science and to grow an idea. For us, just a good exit may be looking a bit differently than for others, where for us a strategic fit to BI later on and an acquisition is what we would like to see. But of course, if somebody else acquires the company or we bring them IPO, it's also great. But I think for a strategic fund, it's always one of the goals, not only to grow innovation, but then to see the mothership, if you want, so internalizing it. But the idea behind it is really to help novel ideas grow and incubate them. But as Bernd said, and that's where Marcus can chime in, it was never just giving money to a company, because I feel money is generic. You know, actually, we mentioned specs and so on. So money is not the problem nowadays. It's really also money plus capabilities, money plus talent. And that's where early on, from a venture fund perspective, we said both have to be tied together. And people like Marcus, with a lot of experience, then became investment managers, very active roles from the fund. But Marcus, maybe you share more about this.
Yeah, I completely agree, because if you see then the investors sitting on the board, they are at the companies and also together with the management team driving and really laying out the way of the future of the company. And Karen, I guess you know this as well. Yeah, so I think bringing their input, meaning maybe an expertise in the one or the other direction, maybe bring experts on board that maybe then can be fitted in with new ideas, with new roles that can be taken by the company, is then really, really important. Yeah, and I think from a venture perspective, from my former hat on, is really that there are small bets in different areas. And if you see, in oncology is so broad, so different new concepts are there. We don't know right from the beginning what really will be the winner, what will be the therapeutic concept that at the end of the day really are sufficiently providing new therapies for patients. And then there are small bets in different areas where you can, alongside over the way, see how the therapeutic concept really is maturing, and where at the end this translation can really happen. And this is really a big plus also the view of the BI venture fund, and I guess, but it's more or less the same also for Bio, to say that you can really see the maturation and then really investing in the growth then for going into the clinic and see whether this is working on patients.
Very much. I think this is really great, insightful, and also the interesting conversation today. I just look at time. I guess we're getting close.
If I may just add one comment, you know, it's also sometimes, you know, we spoke about an ecosystem. You know, it's important that we play to the strengths of people. And sometimes, you know, you want to be an entrepreneur and drive things forward. You don't want to become an employee of a biotech or of an academic institute or so. So I think having this diversity, and then also as a company being able to play across the value chain and across different ways of how to help innovation to grow in a business like ours, which is heavily driven by innovation, is important. And I think, as you heard Marianne and myself speak, we do it, but I think it's a global phenomenon. More and more companies are really not limiting their options, but are trying to go broader and across all options to help innovation grow.
Thank you. I think, Janus, you already come to some closing remarks. That's actually just started. And actually, maybe anything else you want to add, closing remarks, then we go around just to really have some final words. Janus, anything to add? Or?
No, I think nothing more to add. I think we should not forget that we're doing this all for the patients that can't wait. And I think it's great to see how innovation is growing really across the board. And thanks. This was a lot of fun.
Exactly. And Bernd, please, anything for the closing?
Yeah, I'm very excited about the future of life sciences in Germany. Successes that we have attract further successes, and I'm still waiting for a business plan in vivo molecular diagnostics. I hope I'm still living when this business plan is reaching Huatai Gründer Fonds.
Thank you. And Marcus, please.
Yeah, so really, well, it was really a pleasure in discussing. I think I see Germany really on a good way, I have to say. We really saw this starting with the science, and we tackled all the different topics here. And when I see this also in the landscape and with my peers, I really see that there is this entrepreneurial spirit coming back. Yeah, it's really that the people also expect, especially because biotech is more on the spotlight. I like that. Yeah, and it's really true. And therefore, I hope and believe that really also there much more are encouraged to enter the field. Also, the experienced people to enter the field and bringing also the biotech back to the Apotheke der Welt. Yeah.
Thank you. And Miriam, please, final closing remark.
Yes, I would just say that, it's all about collaboration. I think almost everything we talked about today is, bringing people together, bringing networks together, bringing, different players together, be it capital providers from research and innovation groups to governments and so on. It's really all about collaboration. I think there's so much incredible innovation ongoing. So I think this bodes really well for the future of our industry, and by default that means it bodes really well for patients. So it has been a real pleasure joining in this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I also want to take the opportunity to really say by saying that there are really great science in Germany, and that's what's partnership for patients, and we really more aims to get to the patients. And I think again the science is global and patients are global. We're here really a lot of opportunities and potentials to work together and partnership together and collaborate together to bring this excellent science in Germany for the global patients. So with this, I want to again thank you and thank everyone. It's really privilege to have all you the great panelists on this panel to share your insights. It was really also very interesting conversation we had, and I hope everyone can also take something from this discussion. I also want to thank WuXi for hosting this panel. Thank you everyone for all your time.
Thank you.
Much.
Let's welcome our next panel, Switzerland, a global life sciences hub in the heart of Europe, featuring Ulf Rauender, Chief Executive Officer for NBE Therapeutics, Chandra Leo, Investment Advisor, HBM Partners, Chris Martin, Chief Executive Officer, Co-founder and Director, ADC Therapeutics, Alex Mayweg, Managing Director, Versant Ventures, Jordi Montserrat, Co-founder and Managing Partner, Venture Lab. And our session leader is Michael Altorfer, Chief Executive Officer, Swiss Biotech Association.
Well, I'll welcome you to the Swiss Innovation Panel embedded in the WuXi Global Healthcare Forum 2021. My name is Michael Altorfer, and I'm the CEO of the Swiss Biotech Association. Under the title, A Global Life Science Hub in the Heart of Europe, we would like to offer you some insight into the key success factors of the Swiss Pharma and Biotech Hub and highlight the opportunities Switzerland has to offer for international talents, business partners, entrepreneurs, and investors alike. We will outline in which way Switzerland is unique and different in delivering scientific innovation and in supporting international collaborations, which aim at providing solutions to the medical needs of patients around the globe. The Swiss Biotech Hub comprises more than 1,000 biotech companies, and year-on-year venture capitalists invest more than $1.5 billion into this external innovation hub. Together with world-leading universities and hospitals, multinational pharma companies and specialized manufacturers, they form a global life science ecosystem that contributes more than 40% of the Swiss export value and has become an important source of therapeutic solutions for the world healthcare market. We trust that our discussion will shed some light on why these organizations and businesses choose Switzerland as their home base and how they collaborate with their research and business partners in all regions of the world to successfully address the current and emerging medical needs. We have assembled panelists that look at the Swiss Life Science Hub from different perspectives, while sharing their enthusiasm for the power of innovation, the excellent framework conditions, and the international connectivity Switzerland offers in support of developing therapeutic solutions. The panel includes two investors, Alexander Mayweg from Versant Ventures and Chandra Leo from HBM Partners, as well as two CEOs and co-founders of biotech companies, Chris Martin from ADC Therapeutics and Ulf Grawunder from NB Therapeutics. And last but not least, Jordi Montserrat, who represents Venture Lab, an organization that has become an essential part of the vibrant Swiss biotech startup scene, supporting emerging biotech companies and helping them to be successful and effective from the start. I'll now kindly ask all panelists to briefly introduce themselves and to share with you their motivation and enthusiasm for the Swiss Biotech Hub and our common objective to develop new therapies for patients around the globe. Let's start with Jordi, as you are focusing on supporting emerging companies from the very beginning.
Thank you very much, Michael. So it's a pleasure to be here. Yes, I'm the co-founder and managing partner of Venture Lab. Our organization is actually focused on discovering these talents. And I think at the heart of emerging companies, we have the entrepreneurs. So the way it works, and we have the chance in Switzerland to benefit from an environment that is very well connected between universities, academics, universities, also university hospitals, research institutions, as well as the partners, the industrial partners. And that's where we actually tap the starting, what I call foundation of any company, which are the entrepreneurs and the science, of course, which will be used as material to create those companies. Then in this ecosystem, we can benefit from several tools that are being here, that have been set up to help those companies and those entrepreneurs do the first step, ideally in the most professional way. By tools, I mean funding. We find funding directly in the universities. We find funding external, making the links with investors, such as an initiative, VentureKick, which I have also the pleasure to manage. And with these different tools, we basically enable and empower the entrepreneurs at the start, also very often with training when they need it. Sometimes they come with the experience, sometimes with less experience when we have PhDs and people like these who are coming out of universities. We enable, empower them to set the foundation of their startup and to access experience, experts, people in the industry, as well, of course, as entrepreneurs, as investors, which is a key part of the steps necessary to develop the companies. So I'll stop here, but that's just really the basic material, what we do, enabling, structuring. And the ambition, of course, is very early on to give them a professional structure and the maximum proper exposure to the right people in the network. And I think for this, Switzerland is really offers an environment that is very rich, very diverse, very dense, with the expertise in the biotech, in the healthcare globally. Also, I often put biotech and medtech, together with this expertise. We can illustrate later with some example, but that's really the environment that we use to have those emerging companies flourish.
Thank you, Jordi. I'd like to move to Alexander, because you are sort of combining setting up new emerging companies and, of course, securing the funding of them.
Yeah, hi, good to see you guys all in two dimensions, and look forward to seeing you in 3D soon. Alex Mayweg, Managing Director at Versant Ventures here in Basel. I run the investment office here and also our discovery engine, which is very in-depth involved in company creation. I've been with the firm for the last 5 years and really enjoyed that. Before that, I was a drug discoverer at Roche for 14 years. So I've always been fascinated of building teams and research for addressing medical need and bringing molecules into the clinic for patients. And I've been delighted to have been able to do that here for Roche and now more recently in company creation with Versant and building companies. I think The geography is pretty special, as I'm sure we'll discuss. You have this blend of entrepreneurial scientists that have really, decades of experience of taking molecules into the clinic. And I think we're seeing here really a nice buildup of biotech ecosystems together next to the, some of the leading pharma companies in the world. So it's been pretty special and enormous fun to be active in this sector. So great to see you all, and look forward to chatting more.
Thank you, Alex. And moving on to Chandra, as he's the second investor on the panel, equally to Versant Venture, HBM Partners is also active globally.
Yes, and thank you for the invitation. So my name is Chandra Leo. I'm a member of the private equity team at HBM Partners. I'm a medical doctor by training and have studied and worked in Germany, the US, the UK, France, and Singapore before moving to Switzerland 13 years ago. And I'm happy to announce that I recently became a Swiss citizen. I'm as mentioned, a member of the private equity team here. We're at HBM, a Swiss healthcare firm that was founded in 2001, 20 years ago. And we currently have more than $2.5 billion in assets under management. Most of it is in HBM Healthcare Investments, an evergreen fund that is listed on the Swiss Stock Exchange. And as HBM, we invest mainly in biotech pharma, but also in diagnostics, medical devices, and digital health across Switzerland and Europe, but also around the world, in North America, Israel, and Asia, specifically in India and China. Looking forward to the panel discussion.
Thank you, Chandra. I'm moving to Chris, as Chris is one of the two co-founders and CEOs of a biotech company in Switzerland, ADC Therapeutics. Just a quick word for introduction to you.
Thank you, Michael. I mean, I've been working in the field of drug discovery and development for over 25 years, and I think, like everybody, I've been touched with family members with cancer, and have seen over the many years in the industry the impact that new targeted therapies with superior tolerability profiles and effectiveness can have to bring hope to patients, their families, and to the physicians treating them. So I feel very privileged to be working in an industry which has really got a very singular focus, a focus on the patients. You get up every day. It's you know what you're doing. It attracts like-minded people as colleagues and collaborators, which makes it an exciting and stimulating environment to work with usually highly intelligent, highly educated people that you're working with and interacting with. So, I'm very, very privileged to be working in this sector. It's a great fun to do. It's stimulating and rewarding, but it's also tough. Cancer is a tough challenge. It takes many years to be successful at it. Listening to some of the other speakers here, I was quickly counting up. I've worked over the years in 5 continents, and at the end of the day, I'm finding myself settled here in Switzerland, and it's a wonderful environment to live in, to work in. It's got superb education, superb infrastructure, and then when you've got all the risks of something like drug discovery and development, having that stability and quality of environment really is enabling. So very much looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Chris. And I'm sure we all share this engagement and this ambition to help solving medical needs around the world. Ulf, to close the panel introduction, now equally you have started not just one, but several companies, and maybe you give us a quick look into your motivation and your background.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. And like the previous speakers, I have to say it's a pleasure to be part of that panel. And like the previous speakers, I can also mention that I've been very much in a global environment doing research, and actually research brought me to Switzerland many years ago for my PhD thesis at the Basel Institute for Immunology. And while I have been doing additional research in the United States in between, since 18 years, I'm now in the business of building biotech companies, and I chose Switzerland and in particular the region here, Basel, with two of the largest pharma companies in the world being located in this region, because it's a fantastic environment where you have a mix of experienced drug developers, but also a very good network of high-profile and very top-notch academic institutions, where I had the pleasure to be part of that many years ago. So for me, it was a natural decision to build my companies in Switzerland. So currently, I'm the CEO of NBE Therapeutics, which is active also in the area of oncology, like Chris's company, and actually even in the area of antibody drug conjugates. And as many of them in the audience may know, the company was recently acquired by Boehringer Ingelheim. But the unit of NBE Therapeutics, now 100% daughter of Boehringer Ingelheim, will continue to operate as an independent Swiss startup company with the same personnel and with the same energy and commitment in order to develop drugs for the benefit of cancer patients. Before that, and I started the company 8 years ago, I actually founded a company called 4Antibody, which was an antibody discovery platform company also here in Basel in Switzerland, and that company was sold to US-based Agenos, where now some of the products that we developed early on are now in clinical development, and I think one is even at the brink to commercialization. So it's a pleasure to be here and to explain a little bit more what are the benefits and also the the highlights of being part of a Swiss biotech ecosystem or biopharmaceutical ecosystem. And I think we will go into these details a little bit later in this session.
Thank you, Ulf. So I'm sure the viewers can see that this panel can look at the Swiss Life Science Hub from many different perspectives. And when we discussed in preparation of this panel which topics we could address today and which elements may be characteristics for the Swiss Life Science Hub, we did not just rely on our own perspective, but also on the feedback from many business partners. One element that certainly sticks out immediately is the fact that Switzerland has long and deep roots in science-based innovation in general and in pharma and biotech in particular, including strong contributions to basic research, industrial applications, and a commitment to invest in science-based education and infrastructure. If I just take a couple of examples to get started, the Federal Institute of Technology, for example, one of Switzerland's world-leading universities, was founded back in 1855. Ciba, Sandoz, and Roche were also founded in the 19th century, and they developed into pharma companies more than a century ago. Switzerland had also been a pioneer in biotech. For example, last year, we had the privilege to provide the Swiss Biotech Success Story Award to Werner Arber for his groundbreaking work in molecular biology more than 60 years ago. Werner Arber is one of Switzerland's 28 Nobel Prize laureates. At the age of 91, he is a living testimony to these deep roots of Switzerland in life science innovation and an inspiration to all scientists and entrepreneurs in this field still today. He had led the groundwork for pioneering biotech companies such as Biogen, which was founded in Geneva some 50 years ago. The long history in life science innovation also led to a strong tradition for Swiss scientists to protect their new ideas with patent applications. For a country with limited natural resources, this has proven to be an important way to protect its innovation. The strong patent portfolio is only one of the concrete benefits of the long history in life science research, but there are many other tangible benefits in today's Swiss life science industry that have built over decades and have their roots in key events back in the last century. Alex, you have mentioned that you worked at Roche prior to your engagement with Versant Ventures, and certainly in the build-up of that multinational company, you have come across many of these elements that have actually been seeing their groundwork laid back in the last century, be it in the context of immunology research or the collaboration, for example, between Roche and Genentech. Can you maybe refer a little bit to that world and show us in what context you can see that these deep roots in the long history have big implications still today.
Yeah, happy to. And I think when you were talking about the patents per capita and Nobel Prizes, and I do remember a chart once that correlated that with chocolate consumption, which I think is also characteristic here. But I was always fascinated when I was at Roche to see that it was a company that very early on recognized the breadth of potential drug types. I think obviously having its history firmly in small molecules, which of course is a wonderful modality and extremely powerful. Already in the 90s, Roche recognized that other forms of molecules could become drugs, namely monoclonal antibodies, and of course other various formats and mixed formats after that. And I think it was, again, when I read or looked into the background to this, it was, the sort of Roche Institute of Immunology and many of those foundations that were laid long ago, but really had this sort of, there are the seeds that are sown, which have long-term impact, right? And I think we're seeing that impact still today, where probably, Roche was one of the first pharmas to enter into monoclonal antibodies and adopt that as a new modality, and really in some ways launched biotech per se. Right, because before that, I think biotech didn't really exist in that form, and others followed, and of course it came with that then many new advances, and in ADCs, as we touched upon already. So I think that's really profound here, and maybe a more recent example is that some of the early research into TCR and T-cell recognition were also carried out already quite a number of years ago here, which recently led us to found a company in cell therapy here, which is also increasingly strengthening its sort of profile in this area, a little bit behind perhaps some of the others, but Novartis is of course also here a leader in the field, and so it's a similar repeat of this phenomenon, Michael.
Well, thank you, Alex. I know we would have many more examples where the long history in life science innovation is not only characteristic for Switzerland, but has led to tangible results and robust research capacity that we can benefit from today. But I'd like to move on to a second element. When we ask our business partners how they view the Swiss Life Science Hub, there is always this element that they emphasize. They note a work attitude and a mindset that fosters high quality and well-organized collaborations. Collaborations within which also complex and long-term projects can be managed effectively. Typically, they say Swiss partners are seen as honest and reliable, fair and unbiased, and certainly eager to engage in international cooperation. Together, the cultural attitude and the formal regulatory framework provide for an attractive mix that attract many partners to work with Swiss counterparts or even to choose Switzerland as their home base. Its lack of natural resources and small local market inspired the development of products and solutions that help address global market needs. Maybe I can share an interesting statement of a managing director of an international pharma company that has its international headquarters in Switzerland. He mentioned to me once that it's actually an advantage that Switzerland is such a small country. He says, my team never run the risk that they would be distracted by the local market opportunity, but rather they could fully focus on using Switzerland as the platform for its international commercial operations. I know all the panelists can speak to this cultural attitude and to the openness of Swiss companies to collaborate internationally. I would like to give the opportunity to talk to Chris and Ulf to how they've been able to use the strengths of Switzerland and in what way Switzerland has actually helped them to process the buildup of ADC and NBE therapeutics. Maybe this time we switch it. Let's start with Ulf first.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. No, you're absolutely right in your introduction. I mean, due to the small size of Switzerland, we always have to look beyond the border and have to engage in international collaboration, not only for the purpose of finding market opportunities outside of Switzerland, but also for looking for talents outside of Switzerland. And I think Switzerland has always been very accommodating for talent that comes from abroad. And I'm one example of that, because originally I'm from Germany, which is sometimes referred to as the big canton in Switzerland. I mean, the excellent science and an international environment at the Basel Institute for Immunology brought me to Switzerland in the first place. And this is one example where I can speak out of own experience. It was an extremely international institute where we had researchers from across the globe. I mean, from North America, from, of course, all European countries, from Asian countries especially. There was a very strong Japanese fraction at the Basel Institute for Immunology, and that I'm pretty sure is a blueprint for other high-profile institutions, academic institutions in Switzerland, where I think there's a very high cultural diversity already in academia. And that has actually translated very much, at least according to my personal experience, also into the well, biotech and biopharmaceutical environment. At least in my two companies, I can say that we always had at least 10 different nationalities with maybe 20, 30 employees. And so in that sense, I mean, we always have been able to maintain a great cultural diversity in well, our academic research, but also in the activities at the companies. And we always took kind of the qualification, the talent as the highest priority. And this, well, international collaborative environment, I think, is part of the success of many of the, let's say, academic and also commercial research activities that is taking place here in Switzerland. Together with the other factors that you have mentioned, I mean, there's a good legal system where you can build companies, a good framework for building companies. And then having also large corporations, of course, and internationally renowned and active corporations that attract additional international talent. So I think this is part of the success, the international collaboration, the cultural diversity that we have here in the country, and which is, yeah, where, I mean, the environment is accommodating for these, for such a setup. And maybe with this I close and lead over to Chris to add comments that I might have forgotten.
Thank you all. I'm a kind of serial entrepreneur, and we span ADC therapeutics out of my previous company, which was Spiragen, which was subsequently sold to AstraZeneca. And when we span ADCT out, we thought, you know, where should we put it? We knew we already had a number of kind of key points. We had a manufacturing collaboration in San Francisco. We had R&D laboratories in London. Originally, the technology was a spin out from University College London. So we knew we wanted to be a very international company to start with. And Switzerland really seemed like the ideal place. I've already talked about the need for a stable environment, a high quality environment, access, as Ulf has talked to world-class academic institutions and world-class service providers. And all of that exists here in Switzerland. So we formed ADC Therapeutics here back in late 2011. I remember kicking the company's kind of first strategy day off in Geneva. It's an excellent place to have as a headquarters, as a hub for a business which is international in terms of its own staff, but also much more international in terms of the collaborations we have with manufacturing, research and medical partners. So yeah, I really find it hard to fault Switzerland as the ideal place to have that kind of base for companies that are right at the days of formation, but also growing, the ability to attract high quality talent here and to grow the company. You know, we're now a New York Stock Exchange listed company and, you know, plan to carry on rapidly growing over the years. But I don't see us moving away from Switzerland. It provides everything we need.
Well, thank you, Chris and Ulf. And naturally, you have already touched upon many other elements that are characteristic and reflect the strengths of the Swiss Life Science Hub. not just a long life science history and the special culture here, but Switzerland has also developed one of the densest, most diversified and comprehensive life science ecosystems of the world. I mentioned it already in the introduction. More than 1,000 biotech SMEs and hundreds of medtech companies are based in Switzerland. Many leading multinational pharma companies either are based here or have their international headquarters here, manufacturer, top universities and research institutes, well-known foundations in the healthcare sector, and even the multinational bodies such as the WHO, the WTO, WIPO, and the UN are based in Switzerland. This is all condensated into less than 15,000 square kilometers. Truly pushing for close proximity. The life science industry has created more than 300,000 high-value jobs, almost all of which are engaged in some sort of international collaboration. So this close proximity and the dense and diverse ecosystem provides for many advantages, and I truly believe is special in comparison to other locations. And I would like to ask the panelists to share some concrete practical examples. I know all of you could talk to this subject, but I would love to start with Jordi to illustrate how this proximity and diversity can actually help setting up new and emerging biotech companies.
Yes, with great pleasure. And actually, in Switzerland, we can start already with the simple fact that the supports for what we call competitive funding, you know, when you want to go for funding for research and for developing companies, actually supports this partnership by forcing the creation of a partnership between a private entity and a public entity. And then the government will fund the research, but the results of this research will be transferred to the private company. And today, in several cases, actually, the funding goes towards the creation of companies. So this funding will support professors, researchers, PhDs typically, and to link to this diversity, I think Ulf alluded to this, already in this population, we have 60 to 70% of actually international PhDs, which are welcomed in the universities, which then become the company creators, the entrepreneurs. And I think very often we talk the different locations of Switzerland, but we have to remind that the strengths also come that in 2 hours train, you can go to any place. So Basel is an hour from Zurich, who is 2 hours from Lausanne, who is half an hour from Geneva. And all of these locations actually have also very strong hub, not to mention the BioCentrum area, you know, in the Schlieren area in Zurich, which has also several international companies and centers. You have this amazing mix of researchers, professors, entrepreneurs, and people from the industry. And so this mix and this proximity and this closeness actually strengthen what is also part of the culture. So all of these together, I think, really encourages the diversity, but also the proximity, the connectivity, almost forces, if I may say, but for the good of what we're looking for, these results.
Well, Michael, if I may chime in here for a second, because
Absolutely.
I think I could add a personal comment here. I don't go into all the details, but well, I was involved in that type of research, and as I said, very international research environment. But well, all of a sudden, when I mean, the kind of this infrastructure was there that Jordi contributed to build. Well, how academic research could potentially be translated into research that could help patients and could be used to develop drugs. I mean, that was a fantastic eye-opener for me. And so, yeah, 18 years later, I'm here with a kind of 19 years of building biotech companies. And it would not have happened without that kind of network, this support. And then building these bridges between academia and biomedical research in a more corporate environment. So I just want to mention that, I mean, I think I'm a real life example of that, what you alluded to, Jordi, and wanted to add this personal note.
I think we've also seen changes over the last 10 years. I think, you know, it's, you know, all the, you know, fundamentals are certainly there. I did feel that because, you know, big pharma was so prominent in Switzerland. You know, biotech was, you know, growing and always there, but in a, you know, sort of in a different version, perhaps in a different type of ecosystem than we know we might have seen or in the Bay Area or in Boston. I do think that, you know, over the last couple of years now, we've seen, you know, bigger investments take place here, more experienced management teams, but still, even, you know, we've been operating here for more than 10 years, and we've seen that some of our companies that we've invested in, you know, we had to look internationally to build management teams. And I think that's starting to change, you know, and maybe I can just give an illustration of how we've navigated that. You know, we've founded companies like CRISPR Therapeutics, and I think, you know, some of those companies, you know, are obviously still Swiss with an international presence. You know, and now what we're looking at is seeing that some of these experiences are starting to recycle and to pay off into the ecosystem. You know, maybe 10 years ago you had, you know, entrepreneurs, everyone was a first timer, right? 5 years ago, it's still, you know, you take people out of from pharma or from biotech, you know, let's build a company. It's easy to say, to deliver the end result is an adventure, as we all know. So I think that's been an evolution, and one way we've addressed that is we've built a discovery engine here next to our investment practice that is able to hire some of the, you know, most experienced talent, but they're not jumping into a, you know, 2 million seeded startup company, knowing that they have a 6-month notice period. By the time they might show up for their first day, you know, out of the 2 million, 1 million is left, and there's not a lot of runway, right? And so it was a way for us to get, you know, people comfortable to get into biotech because they had that entrepreneurial desire, but they knew they were jumping into a, you know, a strong venture fund, a leading venture fund that is creating multiple companies in parallel. And so that's been very useful for us. We liken our discovery engine, which we called Ridgeline here, for good reason, not just because of the Swiss Alps, but because we liken it as maybe a Swiss mountaineering school, right? We've been there to the summit. We understand how to get there. We can point out the hazards and some of the views, but in the end, we can take entrepreneurs and some of them that are doing this for the first time and make sure that there's no footfalls and that ultimately we're going to get there. And I think now, you know, there are more and more, you know, senior management in biotech and other entrepreneurs and staff in biotechs that have done it before. They have taken projects from early concept stage out of university, but they've gone all the way, right? They've taken them into the clinic. They've taken them through value inflection points. They've taken them through, you know, acquisitions or IPOs. And I think that recycling now is what we're seeing, which I think is really exciting. But it wasn't always like that. And I think this geography had to get there.
Indeed, it's been a strong and remarkable journey. Maybe give the chance to Chandra, because I know you have a slightly different approach, and still you're benefiting and taking advantage equally from the diversity of the Swiss Biotech Hub and Life Science Hub, and also you're building bridges on an international basis. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit how you can take best advantage of the Swiss ecosystem?
Sure. No, and I mean, I think you can't overestimate the impact that Versant's presence has had here in Basel in really sort of bringing additional innovation and entrepreneurship to the Swiss ecosystem. HPM is positioned as a somewhat later or medium later stage investor in many cases. And so we're, I think, part of that sort of chain of investment, because ultimately you need the early stage, the seed investors, you need in some cases family offices, business angels, but you also need the later stage investors and ultimately the public investors, everybody working together to make this work. I think from the HPM perspective, our specific positioning is that while most of our team is based here in Switzerland, we have always been active very internationally, and so we can also help to build bridges both into Switzerland for our portfolio companies in the US or in Asia, where we're usually the only European investor in those syndicates, but also the other way around, helping to bring Swiss and European companies to other parts of the world, both in terms of business development and strategic partnerships, but also in terms of their next financial steps, and companies from our portfolio like Opsiva or ITEOS, Advanced Accelerator Applications, YMAPS, they're all European companies where we were one of the early European investors, but then helped them to access US funding and then ultimately list on the NASDAQ stock exchange, which is not the only way for companies to develop, but in many cases it's still a path that biotech companies pursue.
Thank you. I'd like to close this round or the focus on the diversity of the ecosystem with Chris, because you mentioned next to the close collaboration between academic and industrial partners and the technology transfer from them. In the buildup of ADC therapeutics, you also rely on other partners in the ecosphere, such as the manufacturer, high quality analytics, etc. Maybe you can just wrap up the other partners that are important as well when you think about building a global biotech company.
Certainly, Michael, and I think we've already talked about the starting off with small molecules, moving on to antibodies, biologics. There's now cell therapies, moving on to regenerative medicine, tissue engineering. So it's a very rapidly moving field and expansion in terms of modalities. And I think for startups, back in the day of small molecule companies where I started in Spirogen, you always knew that you'd be able to manufacture the small molecules once you'd conquered the underlying chemistry. But as you move into something as complicated as an antibody drug conjugate, where you're engineering the protein to make site-specific conjugations, you're looking at different epitopes, maybe different scaffolds even, you really need manufacturing partners who can work with you all the way from first in man through to commercial launch. So I think, going back to Geordie's situation, I work in the UK with Oxford University spin-outs, and I see there now that a lot of the challenges that they bump into these very complex manufacturing issues much earlier in the life of the company than used to be the case 10, 15 years ago. And having these sophisticated manufacturing players that are willing to engage with companies and to work with them through the development of their programs, as I say, through a preclinical into the clinic and ultimately to the marketplace, is an enormous strength. It's very difficult to be at the leading edge of biotech without that these days. And then going beyond that, all of the other infrastructure you need in terms of intellectual property management, international legal work, international accounting work across different accounting standards. Because Switzerland's a small country with a lot of multinational companies here, you have very experienced professional people, multilingual, happy to work across these different regulatory regimes on your doorstep. And again, that makes growing an international company in Switzerland much more easy than it is if you're actually embedded in a large company, which is very centered on the regulatory and the environment of its own country, but has less experience and credibility on the broader international scene. So I think that again is a great strength of the Swiss environment.
So there's one element missing that we didn't touch upon, or some of you have mentioned it, but the diversity actually goes further and it includes the talents. I know you could all speak to the diversity of talents in Switzerland and the international cooperation. When I look at the screen here, there's one diversity that is missing. I see males only, but I know that our landscape looks significantly different. Who wants to speak to the diversity topic when it comes to building companies. I see Jordi naturally. Why don't you go first?
I am coming in, and I think it's definitely an important point, and we're not representative really of what's happening in this field. Let me give you, I think, a very talkative example, which is this year. So every year, since 10 years, we're publishing the top 100 Swiss startups, which is a ranking, but most important is we are putting the spotlight on 100 entrepreneurs, which are selected mostly by investors and experts of the scene, and showing, you know, the wealth and diversity of startup. And this year, for its 10th edition, the company who got the first rank is a company called Qiming, and Qiming has a female CEO and founder. That was the first time, but I thought it wasn't just one example. It really showed the number. And if I look, I could mention Volumina, who also has a female CEO. Very early on, we asked questions about, so how are you surrounding yourself? How are you composing your team? And definitely, of course, we can mention women, not only one. I recommend get the ranking. You will see in these years, we even had 2 women CEOs in the top 3. Was the first time, but it was the common and the current long evolution that we've seen now really bringing to fruition these results. So for this, I can really testify, we're not yet there, going in the right direction.
This was a testimony for the gender diversity. I know we could also have a long discussion about national diversity. I'd like to move on to looking into the future. We spoke about the current strengths of the Swiss life ecosystem, but of course, Switzerland also tries to prepare for the future. Switzerland as a country and Swiss-based life science companies continue to invest heavily in science-based education, in building up research and manufacturing capacity, and to further expand its vibrant startup scene. By doing so, it is of course important to understand the trends, emerging technologies, new tools and modalities that become available that can be applied when we try to develop more potent, more targeted, and maybe more therapies faster. I'd like to take the opportunity to ask the panelists to share their assessment as to which trends are important and how new therapeutic options will look like, and how the process may change in the way we develop new drugs and new therapeutic options. I'd like to start with Chris, because you have a clear focus on the oncology side.
Thank you, Michael. I think, you know, when I started working in oncology, there was this kind of distant dream that you'd be able to have what was referred to as personalized medicine. And it seemed like it was, you know, way off on the horizon. But now that is coming much more close and real, and it's making an enormous difference to patients already. But that does involve the ability to diagnose the disease at the molecular level, to identify much more precisely the disease that the patient has, and to match a targeted therapy to that disease and sequence that as the disease evolves through its treatment. And that requires bringing together diagnostics, artificial intelligence, deep sequencing. We work with Sophia Genetics, for example, right on our doorstep here in Lausanne, but a world-class resource in that area. The ability to develop biomarkers and take them through the regulatory process as companion diagnostics alongside drugs. And Switzerland, with its background in medtech, artificial intelligence, tech, as well as biotech, allows you to work down this stream of developing personalized targeted therapies and the whole service package that goes around that. And I think Switzerland's hospitals too are at the forefront of adopting this approach, and some of the physicians here are really working in multidisciplinary groups to bring together the diagnostics, the biomarkers, the targeted therapies, the clinical trials, to deliver these benefits to patients really at the leading edge on a global basis. So it's a very stimulating environment to be developing in this direction, and I think we're just at the beginning of being able to deliver these patient benefits to patients globally. And it's going to be a very exciting decade as we roll this out now.
Chandra, you are looking at women's health specifically, and then also through your Evergreen Fund, you try to support the funding of biotech companies also in other areas, and to get a bit away from the cyclicity of the funding round after funding round approach.
Yes, I mean, our main fund, HBM Healthcare Investments, is an evergreen fund. So as you know, most venture capital funds need to not only invest in companies, but then also try and sell their shares within 5 to 10 years of the initial investment. The evergreen fund structure gives us more flexibility to take on a longer term perspective. In addition to the venture team, which I'm a part of, we also have a public equity team under the same roof, so we can actually stay invested in our portfolio companies way after an IPO until these companies reach important additional value inflection points, and that's clearly a benefit both for the entrepreneurs but also for our investors. And I think right now it seems difficult to imagine a world where it's super hard to raise additional venture funds, or where it's very difficult to do IPOs. But I think all of us have been there before, and we may sooner or later head into that environment again. And so I think having evergreen funds provides an additional sort of factor of stability for the companies that are funded in this way.
Alexander, you mentioned that going forward, Switzerland may play an important role between Asia and the US, and of course, I would also be interested in general how you see the trends and what are the most important elements you see changing.
Yeah, I think certainly, you know, I would say the big pharmas here are already covering many of the disease areas I think that are important. Of course, not all. I think when it comes to novel modalities and drug types, I think biotechs play absolutely key roles in innovating there. But even in some of the classical modalities, you know, like in protein degradation, particularly molecular glues, right? The understanding of how, rather than keeping proteins apart, how can we get two proteins on a date, right? How do we take small molecules and get two proteins together that don't have classical small molecule active sites? I think that's really a huge new wave that is emerging. And I think we're seeing, you know, also here in Switzerland, key advances in that. I think precision oncology is fundamental, and the question is how can we combine, you know, these drivers, cancer drivers, and mutations as groups, right? So what we're really looking for is broader spectrum precision oncology therapies, and I think cell therapy is an angle to do that. And maybe an interesting, you know, one I'm personally engaged in right now is a discovery coming out of Basel in cell therapy. Where we can selectively target cancer versus healthy cells. And we also can target different cancers as a group through shared antigens and have no further immune restriction. And so that could really open the door to new advances in such areas. When it comes to the sort of geographical positioning, and it ties into what we've discussed around talent, I would say that Switzerland is now thinking broader in terms of international teams, right? We have a perfect time zone. We can work with Asia and all the work that we even now do there through our partners in how we provide infrastructure for our companies and leadership, but also with North America.
Ulf, we will give Jordi the last word. So let's continue with you. What's your assessment, your expectation?
There's not much to add. I think Switzerland, the hub is on a very good trajectory. Indeed, we mentioned precision medicine. I mean, new modalities like cellular therapies, gene therapy. I mean, the first cellular therapies, I mean, that were successful in oncology, CAR T cells were commercialized by a Swiss company. And there's also, I mean, curative gene therapy approaches. And I think this is really where everyone is striving towards in the interest of patients, not to have life-prolonging therapies, but really curative therapies. And especially in the area of oncology, I mean, lots of progress has been done there. And I think the companies, the researchers in Switzerland have been part of that journey.
Thank you. Jordi, you're at the beginning of the emerging companies. You see the trends first of all.
Yes, of course. Let's not forget that to do your research, you need amazing microscopes. You need amazing production facility. Chris alluded to this, you know, the production of these therapies. We're talking cell therapies. As we know today, it's quite complex to produce them and they're expensive. So we see a lot, and I see a lot of trends around developing the technologies that will enable this research, enable analyzing the results, enable producing the therapies at affordable cost, because that will be one of the next challenge.
Jordi, I thank you, and I thank you all the panelists for your engaged discussion, for expressing your views and showing how the Swiss Biotech Hub is operating today and how you see its development in the future. I trust that we have been able to shed some light on the key elements that enable Switzerland to be a leading global life science hub with unique features. Deep roots in science-based innovation with leading universities that had been founded more than 150 years ago, multinational pharma companies that look back on more than 100 years of successful drug development, and more than 1,000 biotech companies that form a powerful external innovation hub, which has become a key driver of innovation. Switzerland is a small country that has compensated its lack of natural resources by investing into education, research and manufacturing infrastructure, and a worldwide network of partnerships. An honest broker that offers international investors, entrepreneurs, and businesses a stable, reliable home base, a closely knit network of high-quality life science specialists, comprising medtech, biotech, and diagnostic companies that can translate emerging technologies into commercial products, scientific breakthroughs into effective therapies, and that allows the Swiss companies to collaborate around the globe. Switzerland is a life science hub in the heart of Europe that welcomes talents, founders, investors from all regions of the world to jointly work to develop the healthcare solutions for current and future needs. In this sense, I would like to close this panel and invite all participants of the WuXi Global Healthcare Forum 2021 to reach out to us and to engage with the Swiss Life Science Hub. Be it to set up or expand your business, to take advantage of the numerous investment opportunities, or to establish a long-term collaboration to apply emerging technologies and new modalities to jointly develop new therapeutic solutions. Thank you very much.
Please welcome our next panel, South Korea's rising roles in the global innovation ecosystem, featuring Kyung Kim, Executive Vice President, Biotech, James Jung-kyu Lee, Chief Executive Officer, Bridge Biotherapeutics, Lauren Youngmi Lee, Senior Vice President, Head of Global Research and Development Innovation, Hanmi Pharmaceuticals, Jin Sun-yu, President and Chief Executive Officer, Pharma. Our session leader is Chris Kim, Managing Director of Novatio Ventures.
I'd like to welcome everyone today, our esteemed panelists and the audience, to WuXi Healthcare Forum 2021 South Korea Country Track. And I'm honored to be invited today to moderate the session. And my name is Chris Kim, and I'm the Managing Director at Novatio Ventures, which is an early stage investment fund. And we focus on investing in US and Canada companies. And we have 4 panelists today. And these 4 panelists are broadly representing Korean biotech industry. So representing Korea biotech and venture industry, as well as Korean big pharma industry. And the respective the focus areas and strategy, I think there are some interesting distinctions, and I think we'll probably talk about that a little bit. And so to begin with, I think we have as a part of information provided by the organizer, the individual bio, I think will be available in detail. So for the interest of time, we will skip the individual bio. But how we are going to start out with is have everyone introduce him or herself and what the company is doing with, hopefully with the differentiation strategy the company is employing to address global market. And that's how we're going to start out. But before we do that, just quickly the background for Korean biotech industry. And I believe the audience today is global. I'm sure there are a bunch of Korean audiences as well, which we appreciate your participation. But I think there's a large global audience who's watching or listening in today. So to give a quick background on Korean biotech industry. So the Korean biotech industry has grown at annual rate of about 5 to 7% annually. So that's a pretty solid and consistently attractive growth annually. So Korean pharmaceutical industry is about $20 billion annually. And that's a pretty sizable market for South Korea. But if you compare the number globally, it's actually just over 1.5 or 6% of the global pharmaceutical market. So that means is that what Korea has to do in order for the Korean biotech and pharma industry to be competitive domestically, they will ultimately have to go global. So in a partnership and licensing out, those are very important strategy, and they will ultimately validate sort of the long-term growth and maybe even survival for many of these companies. So that's something to be keeping in mind for today's talk. So we'll try to sort of relate, what's going on in domestic Korean industry, how it has evolved and where it's standing today, and then what is the future for the Korean biotech industry as it relates to not only its domestic market, but global market, and ultimately, of course, delivering this breakthrough, innovative therapeutics and pharmaceutical products that ultimately address patients' unmet needs globally. So that's how we're going to talk about our topics that we have chosen today. And so another interesting sort of background that I wanted to quickly provide before we get into the discussion is that it's related to what I just mentioned, which is if you look at the Korean sort of the economic history, and you would be amazed, and it's pretty well known that in a relatively short time, Korean industry, some of the Korean industry, especially in manufacturing, like automotive and electronics, they have gone very far in a very short time, meaning that despite the small domestic market, which is applicable to these industries, they have become very recognized global leaders. And if the past is sort of the indication of how future will unfold, I think there's a lot of optimism with regard to the future of Korean biotech industry, facing small domestic market, and it's really starting to pick it up over the last decade, and how it's unfolding to become a very strong global player. I think there's a lot to be said about, so that's how we are going to relate many of the topics that we are going to discuss today. So, as I mentioned, as a start, I would like to ask our panelists to go around and introduce their company and tell us a little bit about what sort of differentiates your strategy and how you guys have operated domestically and what your global ambition is. So if you don't mind, let me see it. I'll pick somebody who's on the top left. In my view, it's Kyung. Kyung is EVP of ChinaBio, and ChinaBio is a Korean biotech company, and it's an interesting company, I think, because it's fully integrated, right? So there is hospital, and there is ChinaBio, and Cha Group as a whole owns a number of hospitals in the US as well, and of course there's a very large hospital in Seoul, and I learned that there is even a medical school that's founded by the Cha Group. And I think vertical integration, I think that defines ChinaBio. And I would ask Kyung to tell us a little bit about your company.
Okay, great. Thank you, Chris. First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers of this forum to put this panel's discussion together. And it's a great honor for me to be a part of the Korean panel as well. As Chris introduced, I am heading research and development at Biotech, and we're focusing on cell therapy development to address unmet medical needs for patients with rare diseases and hard to treat diseases with conventional medicines. Lessons that I learned from working in cell therapeutics area compared to my past experience in monoclonal antibody area is, I guess, one of the key success factors would be such that we want to make sure that we understand the biology of cells, because they are essentially the products, and know how to handle the cells based on strong basic science combined with the techniques. And of course, efficient translation of lab data to clinic and vice versa. And I think that's probably what can differentiate ChinaBio. As Chris mentioned, ChinaBio is actually part of ChinaBio Group and is a holding company where academic research from universities, commercial development from business organizations, and manufacturing from contract development manufacturing organizations, CDMOs, and as well as patient treatment at hospitals across 7 different countries. And they are all integrated to combine the strengths and to create synergy under one umbrella. And that's essentially the uniqueness of ChinaBio Group. So given that, our strategy is to leverage this uniquely established bio ecosystem, build a pipeline of products to address unmet medical needs of patients.
Okay, that's great, great. And so quickly to follow up, perhaps can you elaborate a little bit more on your focus on cell therapy, how that has come about?
Okay, so ChinaBio has been actually doing cell therapy development for the last 20 years or so. So there is some technical expertise and background that has actually played a role as a supporting ground to further expand the current pipeline. So as of today, we have about 11 programs in the pipeline, including 5 in the clinics. And they are focused around, let's say, in terms of how to select the optimized cell source for each specific diseases. In other words, given that this is cell product, which it would essentially be put into human beings for treatment, matching the optimized cell type relative to specific disease that we're talking about is very key component in selecting the product feature. So we try to focus on that in order to build and expand the pipeline.
Okay, great. Okay, that's really impressive. Okay, thank you. All right, and to my right is James Lee. So he's founder and CEO of Bridge Biotherapeutics, and it's about 5 years old company, a little over 5 years old, and during that very short time, the company has raised 3 rounds of venture financing, and there was a very large global deal, and then went public, and Bridge has just launched Discovery Center in Boston. So I think there's a lot to be said about Bridge Biotherapeutics. So James, please go ahead.
Thanks for the introduction. So as Chris mentioned, Bridge Bio is a publicly traded and clinical stage biotech company. Try to fully utilize some management team's BD skills and growing Korean innovations domestically. So since the inception, we licensed 3 compounds which are first-in-class or second-in-class in targets of interest. And among them, one was licensed to Boehringer Ingelheim 2 years ago with 1.3 billion price tag. Unfortunately, that compound returned from BI, but we see a lot of potential with that compound. Basically, our business model is to find the novel assets internally or externally, and then develop those compounds globally. As mentioned by Chris, Korean domestic market is still accounting only for 1.5% of global market. So with those small domestic market, we should look outward to develop our compounds.
That's great. Okay. So James and Jin-san are 2 entrepreneurs and among our 4 panelist members, and I would like to revisit on that aspect as well, finding starting companies and raising money and etc. Okay, thank you, James. Okay, and next up, Lauren. So Hanmi Pharmaceutical is sort of kind of like a big brother amongst all 4 companies that are represented here. It's one of the largest Korean pharma company, and also very importantly, perhaps even more relevant to today's topic, Hanmi has sort of opened the door for this global innovation, right? Starting in 2015, And you're one of the, I think the first one to close one of the, if not the largest global deal, and then followed by multiple global deals. And so you have been very busy, I understand. And I think that provided great, example and I guess even, motivation to a lot of companies, including, startup ventures in Korea. And so very, pleased that you are joining today. So tell us a little bit about your company, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chris, for your good comments. That this is Lorraine, Head of Global R&D Innovation. I'm very happy to be here. Great the meeting today. So as Chris commented, the Hanmi Pharmaceutical was founded by Chairman Lim in 1973 and a leading R&D focused company with fully integrated value chains in Korea and China. We have 6 R&D centers and 3 commercialized manufacturing sites, which comply to global standard quality and specification. So Hanmi pursued developing innovative new drugs with all efforts. We currently have 31 new drug candidate with global clinical study. This pipeline is committed to rapid commercialization of the Hanmi future assets. So Hanmi's R&D strategy is differentiated, I think, from other companies in Korea in terms of high R&D investment. So which is the highest among the domestic pharma, and to drive innovation with constant challenge. So we annually invest around 20% of our revenue in research back. And based on this innovative pipeline and global collaboration, we continuously strive to become a leader as a full functioning pharma company from early research to marketing performance. Also, to meet global unmet need, we are actively collaborating with global partners and looking for innovative first-in-class targets and disruptive new platform technology.
Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, wow. Okay, so that's so when you explained Hanmi, actually sounded a lot like global big pharma, Western big pharma that I'm referring to. 20% in R&D budget, and how it's fully integrated, obviously, discovery all the way to commercial. And perhaps one more thing maybe you could tell us a little bit about is to allow all this. Perhaps can you tell me a little bit about the culture within the company? How in Western big pharma companies, that plays an important role, and how many of the companies, as far as I know, is really trying to employ very open, non-hierarchical sort of risk-taking culture, and how they encourage it, internal in-house collaboration amongst the colleagues to really get the most out of their expertise, and people are encouraged to really share their thoughts without worrying too much about what the consequences may be within the big organization. So can you tell us a little bit about your company's culture that allowed all these things to happen?
Yeah, I can say our R&D culture is quite maybe different with other traditional Korean pharma companies in terms of we are really not quite ready to risk taking, and we don't fear about failure, and then we are kind of ready to redirect our strategy at any time. So if you feel like one of our promising pipeline may not be successful, we're ready to redirect and our strategy at any time. And then we were quite open to discuss and internally, and even in the management meeting, we quite really like honestly was straight to say this the situation or the process is not right. So they kind of open process, and I can say one other thing is quite rapid decision-making process. So once we would like to do it, we really kind of speed up all the process. We're making a task force team and then kind of push it all the end with all together. So that was the kind of one of the our culture right now. Yeah.
That's great. Okay, so sounds like best of both worlds. You know, the big pharma, but then startup-like culture, more or less. Okay, that's great. Okay, thank you. And then Jin-san, so he's founder and CEO of Pharma, and Pharma is a cancer oncology-focused antibody company with very interesting antibody platform. And of course, you have a very interesting background as well with the company, and that's something that we would like to hear. So please tell us about Pharma.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Thank you, WuXi, having me for excellent panel discussions. So I want to start with the background history, how I found the Pharma. It was kind of first engagement from Novartis. And Novartis decided to participate the equity investment when I found the company. So we formed as syndicate investment parties, but it fell apart. So we had to look for another opportunity at JP Morgan Healthcare Conference in January 2009. And fortunately, we bumped in Dr. Nancy Chang in OrbiMed, and she liked our technology. So OrbiMed and Novartis called it a deal, and after 12 months, we could get the money in our bank account in September 2009. Since then, we focus on next generation oncology drugs and unmet needs areas. And our flagship Olimbasimab, we recently presented at San Antonio Breast Cancer Symposium with collaboration with Merck together, that Keytruda and Olimbasimab combo in metastatic triple-negative breast cancer is still ongoing studies. We just presented our interim data at the conference. The key delivery message was 50% overall response rate and 67% disease control rate with clear safety profile. And as you may know, Keynote 119 study, which is Keytruda monotherapy in metastatic triple-negative breast cancer, they delivered just 9.6% of overall response rate. So we strongly believe that our Olimbasimab can provide kind of a normalized tumor vessels so that Keytruda T-cell can enrich in tumor microenvironment, but also shifting from tumor environment atmosphere, which is usually immunosuppressive, to immunosupportive environment, so that T-cells can act more likely active to kill the tumor cells in the area. And we are preparing for several various combo trials with partners. We're gonna press release soon. But also our first-in-class pipeline is a PMC309, which is anti-VISTA antibody. That's a beyond PD-1, PD-L1, or CTLA-4. And we are also mainly focused on PMC42 and 43, which is tied to activator. It is excellently normalized pathological vessel to healthy vessels. And we think these assets can apply for many different disease indications, we think. So when we select the promising target in-house, we can get the antibody candidate, and we have experience with, until now, phase 2 global trials. So we can design protocol, we can select the PIs, we can proceed the multinational, multi-trial center trials. That is amazing experience, and despite of just smaller size of companies so far, and we have lots of support from OrbiMed and still Novartis, which is very good relationship.
Great, thank you. Yes, it's notable that your one of the very first Korean small biotech venture to attract global interest from partner as well as VC, global VCs, and who we all know have very sort of high standard for their investment criteria. So it's a testament to your ability to come up with very innovative discovery strategy. So appreciate it. Thank you very much. Okay, so so we have a few questions. So my question to the panelists is, so during the last decade, what are some of the notable developments or activities that have that the Korean biotech and pharmaceutical industry have accomplished? So that's a little bit about what happened over the last 10 years. And then perhaps a slightly different but related question is, what are some things that that maybe may have not worked so well that you wish that you feel that were maybe a little bit different if you had a sort of like crystal ball and well, now you have 20/20 hindsight, but when you look at it, what has worked and what has not really worked, and then how you see it is the future sort of unfolds as to how to address some of the challenges that Korean biotech and pharma industry has. So that's my question. And even relatedly, so I'm sort of lumping all these questions into one big question. What are the trends that are driving the future of Korean biotech and pharma industry, and what factors are contributing to these trends? So I would ask panelists to, perhaps you can focus on one of these questions or maybe two of these questions together. So I would appreciate your sharing your insight.
Okay, let me start. The question number one is how the Korean biotech sector has been developed for the last 2 decades. Actually, that exactly overlaps with my life as a professional career. Back in 1997, the first compound discovered by Korean team was licensed to a global pharma company at that time, SmithKline, China. Whereas that case was my first case as a BD person. And since then, I have observed a continuous licensing out with homegrown compounds to global pharma companies. So almost 2 decades of history of discovering compounds is really characterized Korean bio and pharma sectors. Recently, as mentioned, the Hanmi sparked a new wave. And from then, we see really fierce entrepreneurial activities with Korean homegrown novel science and novel compounds.
Yeah, Korea is known to be a place where things happen very quickly, and I believe Korean life sciences industry is definitely not an exception. So makes a lot of sense. Okay. Would anyone else provide the insight into these questions that I just posed?
Maybe I can take on as a, okay. So I think regarding your first question about some notable development or activities that the Korean biotech/pharma industry has accomplished, probably I think I can mention a couple of things. First, as we all know, Korea has become one of the major countries to successfully develop biosimilar products for global markets, including Europe and US. And we are still seeing their successful launches recently. And I believe that through this, in essence, a success case has been achieved, and it helped positioning Korea strongly in this biopharma field. And of course, this accomplishment would not have been made possible without a strong commitment for long-term large investment, including those for manufacturing facilities. And I think it contributed to forming the overall positive trend from the biotech investment perspective. And probably the second thing that I'd like to mention is that while the biosimilars sort of trying to pave its way toward the end of the value chain, and it also helps strengthening Korean biotech position, this as well supported the early stage R&D deals becoming more and more active. And we saw some significant diverse early stage deals, as we are seeing with panelists here today. And regarding the challenges, which is related to your second question, and I think that while almost all the Korean biotech companies are nowadays targeting global market, we also should be noted that we feel we are always short of right talents. And in other words, competition for talents, obviously. And so let me take an example here. So business development, for example, you'd probably want at least like 10 years or so experience with a few done deals to lead your partnership negotiation. But supply-demand equation is not in the company's favor at the moment, considering almost every biotech company is looking for a similar qualification toward the talent. So I guess probably one strategy to get around that could be such that a company should continue to train its employees in whatever area they need. It can also try to build and strengthen the internal system to support those activities. For example, in case of BD, we can also try to strengthen the project management area, legal, as well as R&D, of course, as its primary relevant parties to be considered to balance the situation. And of course, at the end of the day, each company should always keep in mind, I believe, that licensing is not the goal of the business, rather one of the tools for the business. Thus, we need to make sure that we develop the quality products with right technology, as if we would take the product all the way down to approval and launch by ourselves. This is so my sort of answer to your second question.
Because Korean biotech in the life science industry is now more sort of fully integrated from very early stage venture to very mature pharmaceutical companies, and the functionalities within those different companies, like you said, BD and research and commercial, I think they're all there sort of in different places. And I think there's a lot of sort of, talents going back and forth between different companies. And now big pharma people in Korea are coming out of big pharma to start, biotech venture to sort of translate, his or her experience into the venture setting. So all those things are, very interesting to watch. I appreciate your insight there. Okay.
Thank you.
And then, Lauren, do you want to add something to that? Those questions, please.
Yeah. So I would like to comment on what are really not worked quite so well, and then what are the challenges for the biotech. So during last 10 years, is the Korean pharma industry really changed dramatically in terms of global collaboration and technology licensing out, and a constant increase in bioindustry investment. So Korean biotech and pharma industry was successful in building up strong science for innovative drug development and early clinical study. However, didn't go that much for have the global drug approval and success in markets. So we more and more realized the importance of the late stage development and strategy to have successful market access. So commercialization of the technology has to be accompanied by building up manufacturing and speed up development. We very well know that market needs change rapidly. So it is very important to read the market and patient need precisely, and then also understanding the competitive landscape is very critical. Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so the reason that we are all doing this is ultimately it's the end product that we want to deliver to address the main needs of patients globally. And I think you are reminding us all of that very important message and vision that we're trying to deliver. And ability to execute clinical development along with obviously manufacturing and all the way to commercial. I think that's something that Korean industry as a whole is beginning to acquire more and more, because again, as we mentioned earlier, the history of Korean biotech industry as it relates to becoming very globally competitive is very short, and because it obviously takes a lot of not only resources but time to go from discovery all the way to commercial. I think as a country as a whole, we are sort of like in the sort of midway on average, and I think there is a lot to be learned also downstream. I think upstream discovery and venture and starting companies and venture financing, all that I think is very active, and hopefully a lot of that will ultimately translate downstream to delivering the medical breakthrough. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, so I have yes, sure, absolutely.
Echoing Lauren and Kyung's comment, my belief is that biotech companies' growth trajectory is a function of money, science, and talent, right? Roughly decades ago, so we had a lot of novel ideas, homegrown, but at that time we didn't have money and talent. So only option for the growth is licensing out compounds at a relatively early stage. But that practice I think is changing slowly. So with more money flowing into the sector and also talent from inside and outside of Korea coming to Korean biotech ecosystem, so many companies are considering developing their compounds up to later stage or sometimes up to the end of the game to commercialize the compound, not only in Korea but also in China or US companies with a bigger market. So with increasing capital size flowing into the sectors, I see more companies are considering more ambitious goals. So it's kind of a big change happening in recent years.
Right. Okay. Thank you. It's again, this is as far as I believe, this is the most capital-intensive industry with the highest potential risk until we get to the finish line. And I think I really understand what you're saying there, because so it happened. So we had a joint venture with a Korean VC, and we were actually one of the first, and I think might be the first cross-border VC investor in Korea. And how things have changed from back then to today, it's really remarkable. And a lot of that has been driven by this risk capital, that amount of which has really increased in Korea over the last 5-6 years. And I remember one of the actually really biggest challenges that we faced when we started to invest in Korean biotech companies, 6, 7, 8 years ago, was that we had a very difficult time finding co-investors to invest together into very early stage Korean ventures. There just was not enough VCs, and there was not enough risk capital. And as an American VC, making an investment syndicate it's kind of standard. And we went out there to Korea, and then that's one of the challenges that we faced. We look around and we knock on doors, and there was just not enough co-investor to invest with. But today, I understand that Korean VC industry has grown really, really strongly, and investment, the money that is raised by both VCs to invest and the startup companies, it's just something like 5 times bigger than what I used to experience back in 6, 7, 8 years ago. So interesting and very remarkable development there. Okay, so so this is somewhat related to this sort of venture and startup and risk taking. And my next question is, so Korean life science industry is considered not only highly innovative but also very entrepreneurial. Korean, I think, industry and sort of culture is entrepreneurial in some interesting sense. And And my question is, what's behind the strong entrepreneurial culture? So is it more of a sort of recent phenomenon, or was it always there, but is it really sort of coming out nowadays in biotech in particular? And by definition, entrepreneurialism is great. It's something that biotech needs, but inevitably there's a challenge for being an entrepreneur, the challenge of starting a company. So what are some unique challenges that perhaps Korean biotech entrepreneurs are facing, and how do they overcome those challenges?
Well, since I missed previous questions, I'm going to jump in this question. It is related to also the change of the landscape. In let's say 10 years ago, there are not many entrepreneurs. And still now, when you look at the entrepreneur in Korea, still mostly experienced people are founding their own company. But I'm monitoring that this is also in changing. So young people who has a very flashy idea and they can found a company, and much easier to raise money than 10 years ago. And this is kind of accumulated know-how, experience, and capital, and improved science, everything together. People decide to found their own company, which is good, I'm not quite sure whether it is related to very specific Korean situation. It is, I think, all over the world actually, because there is huge potential in biohealthcare. And now is this kind of trend that, which is good, that many young people decide to found their own company. And that is kind of, I would say, energy source for growing a Korean economy in the future. And when I look back in 2011, when I argued with Korean FDA to get IND for our phase 1, it was really challenging. 10 years later, in this year, 2021, they're still challenging, but much, much better than 10 years ago. But I would expect there is huge room to improve in Korean FDA, MFDS. So I would say when Korean government decide biohealthcare is a national agenda, and this is the business we can feed for next generation, then we have to invest our regulatory organization, hiring more experts, I would say 2 times or 3 times. And they should charge for the all evaluation process fee so that the quality improve and people can be educated in FDA or other foreign regulatory organization. That is necessary, I would say. And in 10 years later, then we will be in better position. This is what I really wanted to bring the topic. There's continuously improving our MFDS organization for our young new entrepreneurs, which is challenging, actually, still challenging as I experience myself in for clinical trial preparation. And also, when I look at, there is much money there, but still, when your science is very good, very innovative, probably so futuristic, and I would say our venture capital also has been improved a lot, and there are lots of experts there, but still, they hesitate to invest very early, very futuristic, very innovative idea platform. And they are suffering to raise, the initial money raising. And I think this will be also on the table to consider that we are not missing such a valuable asset. And yeah, those things that I expect for our young generation entrepreneurs in biohealthcare sector, that will be much better in 10 years, I would say.
Yeah, I think all stakeholders within the industry, starting with startup founders and venture investors and biotech professionals, pharma and regulatory body in Korea, I think they're all evolving, and it's something that I think the evolution of which was very pronounced and pretty obvious over the last 10 years. And I very much understand what you're saying about especially these startup companies and how VCs have evolved in Korea. And when I first went to Korea, so I came to the States when I was kind of little, and then I was here, I had my career here, and then I decided to go back to Korea to start that Korea fund. And it was very different than US, especially in terms of sort of cultural, risk taking and appetite for doing something that is just unfamiliar. And I see a lot of promise because in the past, it's my opinion, but I think it's true. That is so-called smart young kids, smart young people, they were expected to go to either medical school or law school, or after graduate, they joined big conglomerate, right? But I think those kind of expectation has changed a lot. And just like here, if you are very talented and ambitious, then another very valid and possibly more exciting career is perhaps, starting your own company. And I think that sort of belief has sort of, it has become more widespread in Korea. And that I think is affecting not only the startup, company side, but also VC side as well. So it's a really, I think it's in my opinion, it's an exciting, phenomenon that we are observing. Okay.
Regarding the entrepreneurship in Korea, I can compare entrepreneurs of today and those of 2010, early 2000. Entrepreneurs in early 2000 were basically scientists with a great hunger for science, and also at the same time with empty pockets. So they were really focusing on doing their scientific curiosity further without any clear business plans. So they didn't know how to develop the compound globally, but they did have a really great hunger for science. Compared to the Korean recent entrepreneurs, they do have really clear-cut differentiation plans with clinical development plans as well. So they are much easier to raise money from the investors. So entrepreneurs in Korea are now more educated with a very clear global perspective. It's a good side.
Sure. Okay, great. Okay, thank you. Well, education, whether in formal or informal setting, education is something that is almost a priority in Korea, right? And culturally and societally. So I think, as an entrepreneur or as a company executive, continuation of learning, I think that's sort of in Korean blood and Korean DNA. So that's I think that's really remarkable. Okay. And we only have like 3 minutes left, and we pretty much actually covered most of the questions that I have come up with. And maybe for like 2 minutes, could somebody mention something about convergence possibly with respect to Korean sort of existing strength and where the pharma is going, life science is going, meaning that, as mentioned, electronics and information technology in Korea is very highly advanced, world class for sure. And perhaps there's some opportunity for that to come together with more traditional sense of drug discovery and development. Does anyone have any thoughts on how convergence might happen in Korea?
I think since Korea's strength is IT platform, and there are lots of brains available in that field, And we have excellent medical centers, very located in, integrated in southern cities like Seoul. And I think some days we're gonna jump in, big data from medical records and the fancy word as artificial intelligence. They will be all conjugate together. And then we're going to create very, I would say, next generation medicine or healthcare. And Korea may play a pivotal role in that field.
Okay, makes a lot of sense. Today, it's still, healthcare, IT, and digital health, and etc. But what has one of the things that the global pandemic has accelerated is obviously it's kind of validated, I think, to a great sense that telemedicine is not only possible, but it's actually makes a lot of sense in many cases. And like you said, artificial intelligence, the machine learning and all this, where engineering, are spending all their time. Perhaps there's a lot of things that can sort of bridge that between the traditional sense of drug discovery and development and IT side. And Korea, having had already demonstrated globally that it has a very strong technical infrastructure, I think there's a lot of promise there as well. So we actually have run out of our time. So this concludes our session today. And again, I would like to thank everyone, our panelists, for sharing their experience and insight. And I'd like to thank again for the organizer for having us. And I'd like to thank, most importantly, audience for listening in and watching us. Okay, thank you very much.
Please welcome our next panel from Japan to Global, State of Innovation, featuring Sake Asamuna, President, Taiho Ventures, Mayu Morishima, Executive Officer and Biotech Lead Capitalist, Beyond Next Ventures, Haru Morita, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer, Modalis Therapeutics, Mark Noguchi, Senior Vice President and Head of Business Development, Chugai Pharmaceutical, Makoto Mark Ohori, Partner, University Tokyo Innovation Platform, Aki Topuru, Partner, Remegis Ventures. Our session leader is Tai Harada, Manager and Vice President of U.S. Operation, Fast Track Initiative.
Welcome all to Japan Country Track of WuXi Healthcare Forum. In this session, we will discuss the state of innovation of Japan from varieties of angles. The first half of the discussion will be around uniqueness and differentiation of Japan innovation. We will review how Japan has been unique and played a key role in global innovation of life science. Later half of the discussion will be more around ecosystem part of Japan innovation. Your session moderator today is Tai Harada from Fast Track Initiative. Fast Track Initiative is a life science focused venture capital firm in Japan. With our mission to accelerate scientific innovation and translate scientific innovation into medicine, we invest in early stage life science companies as well as create companies in life science field. I am today with fantastic 6 speakers representing the industry in this field, from pharma, biotech, venture capital, and academia. To start off our discussion, all speakers, please introduce yourself, your company, as well as what you are excited in biotech innovation in recent years. Mark, do you want to go first?
Sure, thank you, Tai. I'm Mark Noguchi from Business Development at Chugai Pharmaceuticals, Chugai Seiyaku. Really looking forward to this good discussion with colleagues about innovation from Japan and for Japan, as well as taking innovation around the world. Within Chugai Seiyaku, our approach is to utilize our inventions, our technologies, our discoveries, and work with partnerships around the world to deliver important medicines to patients. Thanks.
Haru, do you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Haru Morita. I'm President, CEO, and co-founder of Modalis Therapeutics. Modaris is a biotech company that develops therapeutics based on its proprietary CRISPR-based gene modulation technology. So what we do is not, instead of our cutting and pasting gene, which the regular CRISPR does, but instead we modulate the gene, turning on or off the gene using a CRISPR-based technology. Modaris is headquartered in Japan and has an entire R&D operation, Boston, Cambridge, Massachusetts. We recently became our publicly listed company as one out of 3 IPO'd biotech company in Japan in 2020. Thank you.
Sakai?
Yeah. First of all, thank you so much for inviting this great opportunity for me. My name is Sake Asanuma. I'm the founding president of Taiho Ventures. Taiho Ventures is a corporate venture fund for Taiho Pharmaceutical. Taiho Pharma is a Japanese oncology specialty pharma company. And I established this corporate venture fund 5 years ago, and we have $300 million under management to make the very innovative early stage oncology companies. So with that, so maybe many things happening in the oncology side. And one of the most exciting thing I'm now looking at is a kind of gene therapy. And that medicine is kind of modulating or engineering the internal T cell to make the CAR T cell and attacking the oncology cancer cells. Such kind of a new generation CAR T we call in vivo CAR T. That's a very great opportunity for the patient and the cost basis. And we cannot disclose a company name, but maybe this week we can have some press release for the investment. Nice meeting you.
We're looking forward to the press release. Aki, you want to go next?
Hi, first of all, again, I would like to mention thank you, Tai, and everyone for inviting us for this forum. My name is Aki Tobaru. I'm one of the partners at Remigis Ventures. Remigis Ventures was created 2014 with the other two partners, headquarters in Tokyo, and we have our offices in Seattle and Boston. Now we have two funds, and we are early stage investors. The uniqueness of our fund is we cover out 20% for Japanese innovations. So we reach out to universities in Japan and also discuss with the innovators to create new corporations, just like Harada-san's group and Mayu's group. So also we do the global Series A, B, and investments. Another uniqueness of our fund is our LPs are all pharmaceutical companies, including Sakai's company, mothership. But we work together and not competitively, we collaboratively. So we are really looking forward to identifying new opportunities from our network and our friends. And the area that I'm really excited about is, just like Sakai said, T cell therapies and especially the biology side, as well as the old target, but the new biology aspect to it, so that we understand entire mechanism of actions or some modalities actions. I'm really looking forward to today's discussion with you guys. Thank you.
Awesome. Mayu?
Okay, thank you. Hello, this is Mayu Morishima. I am in charge of biotech investment at BioNext Ventures, which is a venture capital based in Tokyo, Japan. BioNext Ventures do investment in early stage companies, mainly in healthcare field in Japan and India. And we manage around 200 million USD fund recently. I am a molecular biologist by training, and I got PhD degree at the University of Tokyo. After that, I joined the consulting firm and then served for healthcare related companies for several years, and then joined BioNext Ventures in 2016. The topic I'm excited recently is that, because I have been personally very interested in translational research and the global health field, especially after I did a research internship in South Africa to work on tuberculosis study. So for me, the recent trend of impact investment getting popular in Japan, especially after COVID-19, excited me a lot, because which means not only pure financial return, but also the social impact is being prioritized in the investment decision. So yeah, I expect this trend will enable people to make more attention to reduce the healthcare gap between countries. Thank you.
Great. Makoto?
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, thank you, Tai, and all friends for inviting me for this fantastic session. I'm Mark Makoto Ohori, partner at the University of Tokyo Innovation Platform, Tokyo IPC, we call it, one of the largest academic venture fund in Japan. We are located in the center of Tokyo, a very young fund, but have already got 2 exits from our life science portfolio last year, including the Harrow's company. Thank you very much. I used to be leading Astellas' early stage partnering team in Boston and the Silicon Valley, and led build to buy Nuco efforts or strategic collaboration with industry peers like Potenza or academic partners like Harvard for a long time. I may be able to talk about the industry and academic side both in this session. I look forward to the discussion with you all.
Great, thank you all, and thanks for letting us know about what you are excited, and it's really interesting to hear that. So the first topic we want to discuss is about uniqueness of Japan. Lots of biotech innovation is coming around all across the globe, and Japan uniqueness is not always visible. What do you think the strength of Japan innovations as far as roles in the global innovation context? Mark, do you want to kick off?
Sure, thank you very much. Japan has a long history of innovation in science and technology in many different areas, and transforming that innovation into meaningful products. In our case, of course, we're most interested in delivering medicines. But if we look at Japan's track record in CRISPR, in iPS cells, advances in infectious diseases, cancer immunotherapy, the science is there, the excellence is there from a science and technology standpoint. And then the challenge is how to transform that science into meaningful medicines. And what Japan has been very good about as well is being willing to partner, willing to work with others around the world in advancing or utilizing that science and turning the science into meaningful medicines. And that's important for the world, and also there are incentives from a financial standpoint, because the Japan market is flat. From a pharmaceutical market standpoint, Japan is either flat or declining. So from a financial standpoint and going concern for companies, the interest is to make sure that these medicines are made available, innovation is made available around the world, where there is growth and innovative medicines are awarded or rewarded, both globally and then as well in the Japan domestic market. So partnerships are extremely important for Japan to utilize the excellence in science that is coming from this country.
Thanks. It is a great reflection of what Japan did and how partnership has thrived Japanese innovation. Aki, can you share your idea as an investor?
Sure, thank you. Things that I'm seeing in Japan as an innovator is that just like Mark said, a lot of really great science and technologies. At the same time, in those science and technologies, there are many researchers who has a unique ideas, not only in science field but also technology field. A lot of times I can identify some really new research with the old idea in agriculture technologies or others. So we as a Remigis, we have identified many things, not only Faculty of Science or School of Medicine, but at the same time, School of Agriculture and others. So in a way, there are many unique and eccentric researches available in Japan. So those eccentric ones might create new things later on. So these are the ones that I'm really looking forward to seeing in the future. And also those unique or eccentric research could bring a new venue and also innovations. That's what I think.
Haru, how do you think from biotech entrepreneur viewpoint?
Yeah, first of all, I wanted to argue about the definition of innovation in Japanese context. So in Japan, the innovation means more like a discovery, seeds, leads, and craftsmanship or monozukuri, rather than development, product, or integration. So, but in my understanding, it could be broader, and it should include anything, any way that can change the world in a good way. So, but in this country, the emphasis is more on research rather than development. One good example in my field is, which is gene editing. After CRISPR was invented elsewhere, the Japanese government tried to support effort to invent Japanese version of a new gene editing technology, but who cares? Who cares where the technology come from, as long as it worked and it helped people. And Optivo, if we look at Optivo or Guerinier, which were originally invented in Japan, but we know what happened after that. So I wanted to argue that we should be more flexible on innovation. It doesn't make sense to focus only on Japan originated technology, and we should be very much open-minded for any kind of innovation.
Thanks. Yeah, and I do indeed agree with Haru's point that Japanese research has had strength in clarification of basic science. And this is applied not only to human biology, but broader life science phenomena, which was alluded by Aki. And also, as Mark mentioned, collaboration is very important part of Japan innovation to generate very new innovations. I'm always surprised how people well connected in this industry in Japan. People have known each other over years, and after years of mutual understanding, they collaborate. This actually segues into another question I'd like to get your guys' input on. How do you approach to collaborations and partnerships? What things you have in mind when making new collaborations? I'd like to turn to Sake. Your position is very unique as a corporate VC who has both perspectives of corporate, pharma, and venture capital. Can you share your thoughts?
Sure, my pleasure. Thanks, Ty. So in terms of partnering from my investor hat, so always looking at the portfolio companies. So the partnering is very important financing event and risk share with a partner. That is the most motivation. But the important thing we have to maintain is, if possible, the most advanced major program should be unpartnered. So keep the 100% commercial rights for the program. And a couple of second program, third program, kind of earlier stage program, we think about the partner with pharma company. And so in that case, always maintaining, keeping some of the US rights. So I know a pharma company want to have the US rights. And also biotech side also need to keep the US right. Otherwise, just revenue stream receiver business. So I need to keep the upside of the investment or company's valuation. So that is a very discussion point.
Mark, you previously commented the importance of partnership to generate new innovations for pharma. Do you want to add more comments?
Sure, thanks. We look at, say, three general topics in looking at a partnership. Sound science, be it from us or from the partner, unmet medical need, and then is this a partner that we're interested in working with? So the first two are obvious. Does the science make sense? Is there a medical need? Is there a need for patients for this new medicine? And then talking briefly about the third point. Is this a partner that we want to work with? So let's say Chugai Pharmaceuticals looking at a partnership possibly in the gene editing field with Modalis, with Morita-san. And he and I get together and maybe we don't get along and maybe we don't see how we can put this partnership together with respect to our roles, with respect to the decision-making that Modalis has, the decision-making that Chugai has, and the company cultures, so to speak. We shouldn't not go into that partnership. We should not go into a partnership where we do not think the partners can work together. On the other hand, everyone knows Morita-san, he's a great guy, it's a great company based on great science, and of course, Chugai would be interested in working with Modalis. From a company culture standpoint, from a personality standpoint, we believe we would get along well. Of course, we want to work together, and we believe that downstream such a partnership would be beneficial for both companies and, of course, for patients down the road. So the partnership consideration is extremely important. Do the cultures fit? Do the expectations and approaches fit together, as well as the science, addressing an unmet medical need, and then the finances will come together. If those first three items work, then we'll figure out a way for the finances to make sense.
I do agree. Makoto, how do you think from academia VC perspective?
Thank you very much. So I'd like to comment on the academic collaborations and its regional difference. So currently, especially in the US, there are a lot of strategic collaborations between academic side and the industrial partners. Big companies are set up and going on to use capabilities and in the academia side for industry. And the circumstance, many scientists in the academia side can mature their capability to use their knowledge for the industry. And in some cases, people from each side move to the other side seamlessly under such kind of mutual reliance. That contribute to the upward spiral of the growth of the scientific knowledge in the academia and the industry, both sides. In Japan, such kind of efforts using the significant things, in Japan, such kind of efforts are currently arising. And we, University of Tokyo, formed a new Open Innovation Fund recently to facilitate and accelerate such kind of efforts between academic peers in the University of Tokyo, or with the academic peers like University of Tokyo and the industry sides. And we are looking forward to expand our collaboration with the industrial peers using such kind of funds to facilitate such kind of the efforts, collaborations between the industry peers and the academic side.
So Makoto, I have one question for you. So, so maybe somebody, Makoto and myself worked together for 5 years at Asteas Ventures together. And we closed the maybe several academia research collaboration deals in Boston, UK, and Texas, whatever. And then, so we saw a lot of discussion with those US, European academia. And if you're now working for the University of Tokyo, what's a big difference between the US academia and Japanese academia for the partner?
Yes, it's a little bit touchy question, but the most important difference between the US and academia is the funding structure, especially. In the United States, the many experienced the company officers are running new companies to collaborate with the academic partners, and they are professional, experienced such kind of corporate officers like Haru. So in Japan, but we need more to facilitate, to grow the technologies from the academic side. That are completely different from the other regions between the Japan and the United States, I believe. And so that, yeah, we need more such kind of entrepreneurs, experienced entrepreneurs in Japan. That is the difference between the regions each other, I believe.
Thanks, Makoto.
It is great that we actually have experienced serial entrepreneur in this session, who is obviously Haru Morita-san. And I'd like to get a comment from Haru. I'd love to hear how Haru thinks about an approach to partnerships and how he sees the differences between regions approaching to partnerships as well as company operation. Haru, any comment?
Yeah, partnership is really important for the company business. And as Mark mentioned, that it's not just about the science, but it's the trust or cultural chemistry between two companies. So I always thinking about that and what. So when we seek the partnership, we not just make the scientific progress, but also we always think about the impact to the partner, the benefit to the partner, and how we can make a complementary relationship between those companies to make the innovation. So I think that kind of sense can be easily created between two Japanese companies, but we are looking at the partnership, international partnership. So in that sense, in that case, it's we have to understand more about the partner, but that is not enough in the Japanese biotech company. So I think that's resulted in the lack of so much the partnership, unfortunately.
Sakai, do you have any other thoughts about partnership, regional differences of partnership, looking at both US and Japan?
Oh, sure. So I briefly touch upon the my portfolio company's approach, so maintain the US light. My experience in Japanese biotech startup company is providing global light to the partner and get more cash at the upfront or milestone, near-term milestone. That is most case. And so that is in the usual US European setting, that's losing the upside. We try not to do that, but in Japan that happens, and that may be the difference between the two countries for the IPO market. Many individual investors looking at in Japan for the biotech side, and almost no institutional investor is not looking at. But on the other hand, US is most institutional investors, majority for the investors, and lots of analysts to cover it. So totally different. And with that, in Japanese IPO market or public market, how does some company make a profit in the near term to make the good valuation of the I think. So that is a huge pressure to the Japanese biotech company.
I think this discussion is very interesting. I'd love to learn from Mayu's perspective as a venture capital investor.
Sure. I should say Japanese investors are very reluctant to invest in pipeline-style drug development companies. And then, yes, the reasons are because, as Sakai-san mentioned, because of the IPO market situation that not institutional professional investors are majority that who can evaluate the pipeline drug development companies. But I should point out that the reason why Japanese investors are reluctant to invest in drug development pipeline companies are because of limited number of investors who can evaluate pipeline, unfortunately. let me elaborate a little bit. Until recently, the lifetime employment was the work style for Japanese Japanese people. So, which means you work for the same company until your retirement. So therefore, mobility of talent between companies were very limited. So as you can imagine, only limited number of ex-farm people were in BC in Japan. And then it became harder for BC to evaluate drug pipelines. Yeah, as you can easily imagine, investors do not want to invest in something you're uncertain. But recently, like Makoto-san, many ex-pharma people who experienced investment abroad or from pharma people are coming to VC field in Japan, and then I hope situation is getting much better soon.
Great. Mark, you should have a comment from someone who will eventually take in new innovations. What do you think, and what do you expect?
I think that's an interesting discussion, or this is an interesting discussion about risk and risk management, and including perhaps a genetic basis for risk in Japan. But I think that each company manages risk in a different way, and for me, the best way to address risk is to identify the expertise necessary to move a program along or move an opportunity along. And if the expertise exists within one's own company, great. If there's additional expertise required, for example, in development, in clinical development, in manufacturing, in commercialization by territory, then partnerships can help address that risk, can help manage that risk. Thus, there are many different types of risk and many different ways to address managing that risk for a company, large or small. And the primary assessment is based on the expertise required to move that program along, to manage that risk down.
Interesting. And I think this discussion reflects what we exactly see day by day. And it is true that probably investors take more risks, allocate effort and capital to invent something groundbreaking. That is what I felt when hearing you're listening to your discussion. But another comment I'd make is risk appetite is not coming from individual player, but the collective consequence of all players in this industry. Startup decision making is largely driven by venture capital who are investing in those companies. And venture capital decision making is also reflecting the decision making and way of thinking of LPs who are investing in venture capitals. Japanese venture capital is still heavily depending on corporate investors for their capital, and corporate investors are not necessarily always welcoming take largest risks. And also, as someone alluded to in this discussion, in public investors, we have lots of retail investors in the market who are not necessarily understand the full risk or full profile of the risk of science underlining in biotech businesses. And I think it is our role to communicate and educate them, and then proactively take risks in where we should. One more important element we haven't discussed is about ecosystem. I'd like to get your input on trends and activities in global as well as Japan ecosystem in recent years, because that is very important to accelerate partnership and innovation. I'm turning to Makoto to get insights from what is happening in academia in Japan.
You're talking about the ecosystem from academia perspective.
Exactly,
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we may be able to talk about its contribution, not only as the origin of new technologies or science from academia, but also a kind of suppliers regional brands in the global scene, I believe. And academic activities and the people in the organizations are always so genuinely in global competition from the beginning, as you know. And people in the academia and its activities has global reach. So genuinely, I believe. So academia can add such kind of fuels to the regional ecosystem from both aspects, through the strategic collaborations with the industrial partners, not only the scientific collaboration, but all the funding, I believe. In Japan, everyone is using the scientific capabilities in the academia to expand their industrial efforts, but we maybe utilize the academic brands to reach out to the global market collaboratively between the academia and industry side much more in Japan, I believe. That's my impression.
Aki, do you have comments from investor investing in both Japan and US?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, actually, I have seen many newer incubation systems which are funded not only pharmaceutical companies, but also the venture capitals, as well as the like a contract manufacturing company or contract research organizations just chip into the incubator, and then they try to create new companies based upon basic sciences. So also, another interesting thing that I have seen is that it used to be those incubators outside of the city, but nowadays inside of the city that scientists would not like to travel. Maybe just they come down to the labs from their apartment upstairs or something like that. So for example, is Boston and San Francisco, and here in Seattle and also Tokyo, the big city, which has a limitation of the landscapes and the land, but vertically they can create really uniquely set up incubators. It's almost similar to high-tech industries, but the same idea to the biotech industries. So I really hope to see more often in Japan as well, not only in Tokyo, but also other local cities or local places where they have their own budget, and also local ecosystem can help to build the new things. So I have seen that many in the big cities in the US and Tokyo as well as the other European, like London and Berlin and Munich, but hope to see more often in Japan.
Yeah, indeed, we see very interesting movements in Japan and especially in Tokyo. I'm sure, Mayu, you have much to share around this.
Yes, we actually learned from San Francisco and the Boston case that how those kind of incubation laboratory plays a crucial role for innovation. And then BioNext Ventures started the first incubation laboratory in the middle of Tokyo, where the place which is in a place where cafeteria of previous Astra's Pharma. And then we believe that the importance of physically being close among academia, startup investors, and the pharma for new collaboration. So in sense of biotech innovation, Tokyo is still not matured enough compared to Boston and then San Francisco, but yeah, we are taking action. And then we hope that those kind of incubation facility in the middle of the city will increase in Japan.
What is the occupancy rate for the such kind of biolabs in Tokyo? So in the Boston, 100% always, but in the case of Tokyo, Japan, what is the percentage?
I can only talk about our laboratory case, but
sure.
Almost 90%.
Oh, that's great.
Oh, that's good.
Yes, usually more than 20 companies are there.
What about the turnover?
Turnover, we want them move out 1 year, but they stay 1 to 2 years usually.
Mm-hmm.
We want them to grow quicker, but they can't find the next place to move. that is also the problem. So yeah, if they needed to move out, they needed to find a laboratory far away from Tokyo, and then we hope that someone or we can start the bigger laboratory in the middle of Tokyo soon.
Yeah, in Boston, where we have our operation, in most of the incubator, the company come in and then grow and graduate or die. So within a year or so, the companies come in and go. So that the turnover is really high.
Just adding one comment from Fast Track Initiative viewpoint, we also work closely with an incubator and local government of Kawasaki. And what we see in the incubator is that there are some large companies visiting us, for pharma companies, satellite labs, sometimes life science research office or manufacturing companies, so on. So large companies are part of residents, and they tend to stay longer, obviously, than startup companies. And I think the existence of those large companies stimulate also collaborative discussion between startup companies, between startups and large companies. I think what we see unique in Japanese ecosystem. So, but it is also true that we still have many more challenges in the ecosystem, and like to focus on the challenges side of ecosystem. I'd like to discuss what issues stand out to you and what roles you play to solve those issues. Turning back to Mayu.
Issues, there are many, but I should point out the I mean, the funds and the talent are still limited in the biotech field in Japan. Those are the key issues I should mention. But though I'm not, I'm a little bit positive with the recent trend, because recently more and more integration between IT or data approach and the conventional biotech approach is emerging, like AI drug development or apps for therapeutics or other cases. And then more and more traditional IT VCs are investing in those integrate field first. So I hope that those VCs will come into the biotech fields eventually. And then I hope the similar situation will occur to the talent aspect as well.
So I just want to touch on the ecosystem. So as I'm totally agree with Mai-san's comments, the risk management for the biotech is very limited in the country. And so to make the ecosystem much more streamlined, we need to invite outside money. That's obvious. And the big hurdle for the foreign investor, like Taiho is looking at the US European investment, but if we're looking at the Japanese company, so I don't know, this is Modalist's case, but founder and the management takes 50%, 70% share of the company, and the investor only take the 20% or something like that. And in the case, we cannot control anything for the voting, right? And we cannot change the founder, not CEO or management team from the investor side. That's very risky from the investor perspective. And then, so if this ecosystem, Japan's ecosystem, to be expanded to the more attractive for the foreign investors, maybe changing the capital structure, that is the one thing we have to address. But I have a question to Aki. So you're looking at for both countries, right? And then when you make the Japanese investment, what is the capital structure? Do we have, what kind of cap table are you looking at?
So thank you for asking me the question. This is really unique. It's not unique to us, but usually whenever we identify scientific innovation or unique research, and when we see that some potential in the future, we tend to license in the idea with the IPs, and we create company first. And then we put those IPs and ideas into the company, and then we create capitalizations, right? and we initiate the seed money to reproduce the data. At the same time, for the scientific innovator or principal investigator from universities, we tend to offer them as a scientific advisors or scientific, like a not chief scientific officer, but science advisors. So those who create those ideas, who can conduct their own research at the universities, but at the same time, they can help us build the new things at the company, and then we go out raise money. So basically, we try them to stay inside the company as one of the scientific founder, not officers. So that I don't want to say control, but we can create a better structure in terms of the fundraisings and future building companies.
Okay.
I think Aki's point is very interesting, and that leads to difference of capital structure in Japan and the US. In Japan, entrepreneurial talent is still lacking, and there is still very limited number of people with like Haru's capability is very limited. So I think it's important to give them large shares and responsibilities to lead companies rather than venture capitals having much of the shares and leading. So I think the power is still on entrepreneur's side, and love to hear what Haru's think.
Yeah, that's actually case by case, and in our company, the share of the founder quite high, but it's not to mean that we have it's not intended to have a large portion of control. It's more to stabilize the company due to some reasons. Because after we become a public company, the investor wanted to have a stability. The company which has a large portion of the share owned by management is regarded as the stable company. So then the share tends to be stable.
Tai is hitting really interesting points regarding serial entrepreneurs in Japan. Morita-san is a really great success story, and he's a really great guy, and I would like to have his clone for my companies, but he is only one, right? So, but certainly in Japan ecosystems, we need serial entrepreneur like Morita-san's. So these are the, I think, a missing link right now, I think, in my opinion, for the serial entrepreneurship in Japan.
Yeah, but one thing I wanted to point out is when we talk about ecosystem, we tend to think closed system like a jail, but we are free to go. We are freemen. We can explore any opportunity outside of ecosystem. In our case, we are a Japanese company, but since we saw the talent pool in Japan is not large enough, we explore the talent opportunity in Boston. So that's why we set up our operation in Boston, because Boston is the center of our life science, and people from not only from US, but also from UK, other European countries and Asia, jumping into the Boston to explore a job. So I think we should not limit ourselves, and if we think the link is missing, we can always have an option to explore the missing link outside of the system.
Great point.
Yeah, agree.
Makoto, you are saying something?
Yes, from a financial perspective, in Japan, the convertible note is getting more and more common right now. It's completely different from the United States. In Japan, it's getting more and more common from now, and it will solve to some extent of such kind of valuation issue in the seed company, I believe. as Haru mentioned and Aki mentioned, so such kind of professional company officers can solve such kind of the specific issues in Japan, I believe.
Fantastic points. Since we've discussed much about the past and the current of Japan innovation status, we'd like to discuss a little bit about the future status of Japan in wrapping up with that question. So could you finally express what you expect and how you project 2030 and 2040, and what is your expectation for future in biotech innovation in Japan? Starting from Mark.
Sure, thank you. And just to wrap up the discussion on ecosystems, we view the ecosystem as the world, the globe. And there's so much variation within a country, within a territory, as well as in different regions, that the ecosystem is the world. And we must adapt and address opportunities or challenges wherever we go in the world. And looking off into the future, it's very exciting because of the convergence of science and technology and engineering together to address healthcare challenges. So application of artificial intelligence, deep learning, machine learning, to drug discovery, to development, to commercialization even, utilization of real world data and big data in all of these, in research information, research data, and patient data. All of this will lead to the ability to identify new medicines, perhaps on an individual basis, so personalized medicine, but overall safe, efficacious new therapies that treat each one of us in ways that we don't know of now, that in new ways that will be most effective for each one of us. And that's what's exciting about the future.
Haru.
Oh yeah, I totally agree with the Mark's point. The ecosystem is global, and so in that context, so the entrepreneur like me is always finding the gap between the ecosystem and try to make some arbitrage there. But in the meantime, since the world is more connected, maybe in 2030 or 2040. Then we can enjoy the more expertise outside of our the small ecosystem rather than the global ecosystem. So then make the better innovation happen. I believe.
Sakai.
Sure. I think I just want to raise 3 points. The first one is cancer could be cured. So that's kind of the expectation or hope, and that maybe 2030 is a little bit too near, but to 2040, that may happen. That's my expectation. And also, so pharma industry or biotech industry going to the 2 categories. One is pure drug development company. The other one is a more healthcare service provider. So drug is part of them, kind of J&J model, I think. That's the second thing. And the third thing is I just want to say that maybe that China could be the third powerhouse in the biotech. So maybe we need to look at, so some of the de novo first-in-class drug is already research started in the country. So Taiho Venture is also looking at their movement as well. Okay, that's my comments.
Interesting. Aki.
Thank you. I totally agree with what Mark and Morita-san and Asanuma-san mentioned. I think biology is still complicated. However, some of those like a deep learning and also others can take care of those complicated systems. For example, just like Sakai was mentioning cancer biology, it is tough right now, but certainly maybe 20 years later, cancer biology will be really well understood, and then there are many drugs available. And also deep learning that Noguchi-san mentioned, certainly it's happening right now. There are many companies the small molecules and also antibodies, including single domain antibodies. These are companies that they are identifying new targets and or new epitopes with the new sequences by utilizing deep learning or next generation sequencing. So I'm sure 10 years, 20 years later, there are many opportunities for like drug treatment for patients. I certainly hope that. And I really hope that the biology, by the time biology is really well understood, and we can have not difficulties, but I have to mention that the biology is still complicated. So I hope to see more understanding in biology. And by the time that it accomplished, I think a molecular biology book will be really thick, so that I don't have to be learned again.
Mayu.
Sure. Yes, I hope Japanese ecosystem becomes more diversified. Players, including VC, academia, entrepreneur, or pharma, have more diversified teams, not only nationality aspect, but also background, career background and gender. So I should say I am excited to see more women in Japan track session, not in the 20 years later, but very near future.
Very important point. Makoto, do you want to share your thoughts?
Yeah, everyone covered almost all stuff like AI, digital transformation, multifunctional modalities like antibody or other biological molecules. But a few points I may be able to add from a technology viewpoint would be the kind of various artificial organs may be developed and replaced to the original organs or tissues to potentiate our ability or possibility. And I'm also hoping that the prevention therapy, like ultra early detection of cancer or other severe diseases, might bring significant benefit to the patient and may significantly affect current pharmaceutical. It may significantly affect current pharmaceutical business models in the future to good directions, I believe. So that things I may be able to add.
Thank you all for sharing your wonderful thoughts for the future. I personally very much excited about precision medicine with the power of data analysis and data sharing. And this is a great way to end the session. We hope this discussion gives you perspective of what Japan innovation is and what we think from Japan. Thank you again for taking time with us today.
The fruits of our industry bring hope and promise to patients globally. Nowhere is this more true than in the rare diseases. With more than 7,000 diseases, these patients have few therapeutic options. We now have unprecedented opportunities to use our collective energies to make positive impact for these patients and to change their lives forever. Let their inspirational precepts guide us in our dreams, hopes, and quests to bring innovative medicines to them. Never give up. Thank you for joining us for the opening session of Innovation Spotlight Part 1. Please join us again for the CEO Roundtable from 6 p.m. until 8 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time on March 16th, and then at 8 p.m. for the remainder of the Innovation Spotlight Part 1 featuring South Korea and Japan.